Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Let Us Head Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. Part of What If Deku Discovered Analysis Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Living in the modern world full of interesting quirks can be amazing at times, but downright depressing at others. Some people are ostracized their whole lives for having a weak or tainted quirk. Unfortunately, Midoriya Izuku is all too familiar with this. Midoriya Izuku's 5th birthday has come and gone without a hint of a manifesting quirk, and now she's starting to worry. Izuku schedules an appointment with a specialist to help Izuku get more information. The young boy's excitement grows as the appointment day nears. Mom, do you think that they'll tell me my quirk is stronger than All Might's? He reaches up to tug on her sleeve, pulling her attention and her heartstrings. You know, it just might be. Her voice hitches as she forces the words out of her mouth. But don't get too excited now, we still don't know for sure that you have one. She adds a false bounciness to her words, hesitant to break his dreams. Of course I have a quirk, Mom. Everyone does. He puts his hands on his hips as he lectures her. Not everyone. She taps his nose. Did you know that 400 years ago no one had quirks? Really? He raises an eyebrow at her. Then how did the heroes do their job? Does that mean that even if my quirk isn't as cool as Kaken's, I can still be a hero? His eyes go wide at this conclusion. There weren't heroes back then, at least not like today. The heroes back then were just good people, like firefighters and police officers. You can still be a hero without fighting villains at all. But it's cooler if they do, Izuku argues. Yeah, almost as cool as you. She gives him a hug. The day of the appointment finally comes, leaving both Midoriyas feeling nervous. The nervousness grows with each test the doctor takes, trying and failing to draw out his quirk. So we took an X-ray of his foot. And Izuku doesn't have the vestigial toe joint, which points towards the probability of having a quirk, the doctor explains, pointing at the image of Izuku's X-ray. There's a moment of silence, only broken by Inko's words. So then why hasn't his manifested yet? While it's true most quirks manifest by the 5th birthday, it's really more of a bell graph centered around 4.5. This means some quirks, especially mutation types, manifest at birth, but some don't manifest until near the end of grade school or later. What percentage of people fall into that category? Inko's worry for her son is clear. Well, honestly, just under 0.001%. But with about 20 billion people in the world, that's still almost 200,000 people globally. Inko and Izuku process that information for a moment before the doctor continues. If it still hasn't manifested at 7 years old, I'd be inclined to think it's a dormant quirk, a quirk that has such a small effect or such specific requirements to activate that it is next to impossible to identify. Next to impossible. That means it is possible, right? Both adults startle at the first words Izuku's spoken since the appointment began. Yes, it is possible. It's just that would require testing for a quirk factor, the numerical quantifier for how potent a quirk is. Normally throughout life this number goes up, especially with use. The doctor rubs his glasses with his shirt while he continues. The process of testing this is time-consuming and expensive, much more than most people can afford, I'm sorry to say. The feeling in the room is somber, yet palpable with dread, to the point that Izuku feels the need to speak up again. That's all right, I guess. Even if we checked, that doesn't mean we'll know what it is or how to use it. His body language shows he isn't as strong or as happy as his words sound. The doctor turns to Inko. You've got a wise young boy on your hands there. He'll likely do you proud. Yeah, I'm sure he will. She wipes away a tear. When they get home that afternoon, Izuku is ever so slightly different, like he's studying his surroundings, watching the world around him with a silent gaze. He starts writing notebooks labeled Quirk Analysis for the future. After a few days, things go back to normal, mostly. He starts talking again about how he still might have a quirk and there's still hope. But he looks like he's cramming for a test on everything around him, writing notes on any and all quirks that catch his attention. One night, after his mom's nightly bedtime story, he sends her a slightly flushed smile and begins to speak. You know how you can pull things towards you. She nods in affirmation. And you know how you showed me how to use the computer so I can get into that All Might video. His cheeks grow redder while he twiddles his fingers. Yeah, well the other day I had a thought about it, and I decided to do some research. He starts smiling and pushes his hands outwards. Oh, and what did you find? She's smiling big right back at him. Well, to me, when you use your quirk, it looks almost like there's an invisible, not touchable string pulling it to you. And after I had the computer teach me some things, he pulls out a piece of paper with messily written hiragana and sounds out some of his next words. I think your quirk does a thing of superconductive quantum locking, which it said keeps something stuck to only moving one way, and that it's actually the power of gravity keeping it stuck from falling. Wow, you learned a lot. I'm not even sure what some of that means. She hugs him tight. I guess one thing I understand, though, is that you're already getting smarter than me. Really? He smiles from ear to ear. But you're so smart. She ignores his praise, but elects to not disagree with him. Did you already write your theory in your book? He looks at her confused. Theory? Oh, a theory is an idea of how something works. Oh, no, I didn't. Will you help me write it? He runs over to get his half-full notebook on quirks. Of course. She smiles at him as he runs away. As soon as he's gone, she pulls out her phone to look up the difficult kanji she'll need for such scientific terminology. It won't be long until he asks for another notebook. Will it? At 8 years old, Izuku has come to terms that his quirk is seemingly eternally dormant, and he's gotten into the habit of claiming he's quirkless whenever people ask. Though, he still fills book after book with knowledge and theories for all the different quirks he finds interesting. Understanding the quirks around him and identifying their strengths and weaknesses could help him become a hero even if he never gets a quirk of his own. But even endless knowledge requires the skills to use it. He decides to share his thoughts with Inko one afternoon when she's making dinner. Mom, he asks, do you think I could start learning martial arts? What brought this up? Well, I think we both know that we may never discover my quirk. Inko stops stirring the pot, but Izuku continues in a rush before she can interrupt with her usual false reassurances. And I found out All Might has a sidekick called Night Eye, who fights basically quirkless since his quirk can only be used once a day. Do you think that'll be what you want to do? Her voice is calm, letting him know there's no judgment, though she does start tearing up. She's letting him decide completely. Izuku's eyes have a serious aura about them as he speaks. Mom, I think this is the only path I can take and still become a hero. This starts a discussion on which type of martial arts would be the best to train in. They eventually decide on Chinese Wing Chun since it focuses on defending oneself and limiting the opponent's movement. Izuku proudly walks into the dojo on his first day. A tall man, maybe early 30s, with a dark, square-like beard stands in front of who Izuku assumes are the other students. This might be a new dojo because most of the students are around Izuku's age, 6 to 9, and only a few older kids with a single teenager, all of which are standing in a neat line, where they can all see the teacher. Ah, Midoriya, I presume. The tall man asks upon Izuku's arrival. I'm the trainer, Dakariki, but you can just call me Dake Shishu. This should go without saying. But he glares at one of the students. Quirk usage is not allowed in the dojo. If you can help it, we are here to learn the art of Wing Chun, not play around. Oh hi. Izuku's movements are rigid, and he is slightly upset at his stutter in his first sentence. Everyone, this is our new student, Midoriya. He turns back to Izuku. Do you have any prior experience in martial arts? No, Shishu. Izuku looks down briefly at his shoes, worried about failing before he even starts. That's quite all right. Most people don't, Dakariki says in a light tone. The rest of you, get a partner and continue where we left off last Friday. He turns back to Izuku. Wing Chun relies on the experience and knowledge of different forms, Dakariki explains. The first, and most important to understand, is called Siu Nim Tao. He gestures to a poster on the wall, displaying the Chinese characters as well as the translation little idea. As you learn other forms and techniques, you'll likely notice how they all relate to Siu Nim Tao. His first day at the dojo is turning out better than he expected. Izuku was worried that his less-than-average physical strength would hurt his performance, but he was assured when the lesson first started that flexibility is a large part of Wing Chun, sometimes even more so than strength. It helps since, as an 8-year-old boy, his flexibility is still high. At the end of his first day, Dakariki Shishu brings him aside to talk while the other students complete their cool-down exercises. Dake Shishu gazes at Izuku with calm eyes. Midoriya-kun, I can tell you want to get the most out of your training as possible. So I recommend doing strength exercises on your own time, just to keep up, you know. It's not as important right now, but when you're a little older it will be. He pats Izuku's shoulder to ensure he's paying attention. Just make sure to stretch before and after. When you do, we don't want you getting stiff after all. Thank you, Shishu. Izuku bows like he was shown in class. But I thought you said muscles aren't important. He questions. Shounen, your muscles will always be important. What I said is that flexibility is also important here. But flexibility only gets you so far. When you're outclassed in terms of weight, some techniques won't work without the power to follow through. Hi. Thank you, Shishu. He bows once more, before running off to collect his things. Midoriya Izuku continues going to his dojo 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He's nowhere near the top of his class, but his endurance, strength, and flexibility have steadily improved from when he started. After a few weeks, he's sure this is the martial art he wants to continue in, but he feels bad about needing a ride from his mom. He's interrupting her already busy day, but his current schedule allows no time for him to walk. He gets home from school, patches up any scratches or burns from the day, changes out of his school uniform, and eats a snack. Inko never complains, and he knows she wants to help him whenever possible. But he also knows he's adding another burden onto her regardless, so he wants to talk to her about it. Upon arriving home from the dojo on Friday, he sits at the dinner table and begins eating the udon his mom has just finished preparing. "Hey, Mom." "Yes, Izuku-kun. If you want, I think you don't have to give me a ride to the dojo anymore." He pulls his head to his shoulders. "Oh, and you're not going to be late." "Well, I was thinking I would want a bike anyways, and this is the perfect reason to get one." He swallows despite having nothing in his mouth. "So I've been saving up, and I think I have about enough now." "Saving up?" She questions. "How? You don't have a job or allowance. You haven't been bullying people for money, have you?" She jokingly chides. "No, He pauses for a moment. "I've been saving my, lunch money." He sheepishly grins. "Izuku," she scolds. "Have you not been eating?" No, I have been. Just not at school," he mutters silently under his breath. He can't exactly tell her that if he brings money to school it'll get taken. I didn't realize Katsuki-kun would actually share his food. But from now on, no taking other people's food. "You have the money to get your own," she reprimands. "Of course, I'll be considerate about that." His pitch and volume taper off at the end. "Anyways, think you could take me to the bike shop this weekend so I can have it ready for Monday?" "Of course, shopping together sounds fun," she says, clapping her hands together. As a third grader, saying you take martial arts like karate or kung fu would easily boost anyone's social standing. That is, anyone except Izuku. That's because they would all know why he's taking those classes. He'd only start receiving comments like, "Deku here thinks he's all tough now. Let's show him he's not." Or, "This kid's so useless, he needs special lessons just to make him feel normal." So he doesn't dare bring it up at school. He really is glad he started taking Wing Chun. Too bad his confidence in the dojo didn't ever leave the doors. Part of him wonders if he's only able to be as free at the dojo since no one knows of his quirklessness. He's not fond of testing that thought though. If he lost his support there, he doesn't know what he'd do. Everyone in school knows he's quirkless. Bakugo has ensured that. Bakugo used to be Izuku's best and only friend. But taking martial arts and having the support it brings taught Izuku that it was never really friendship. It was one-sided idolism directed at a bully. Friendship or not. Their previous companionship gave Bakugo ample ammunition to use against him. Wherever Izuku went, Bakugo's baggage followed, along with a dirty nickname and the stigma of being quirkless. Even if someone wanted to know Izuku, they would be too afraid of Bakugo and his hero's quirk to do anything about it. It was a battle that had a clear victor for everyone to root for. Izuku gained some things from his experience though: apathy, seclusion, dread, and an abnormal pain tolerance. All this surprisingly results in Izuku constantly standing between Bakugo and other would-be victims. Izuku doesn't care anymore, but he knew the victim would. Eventually, either Bakugo stopped targeting anyone who's not Izuku, or he got better at hiding it. That is to say, it's not often that Izuku sees Bakugo's rage aimed at anyone other than him. As his elementary years come to a close, Izuku can't even remember the last time he hadn't been on the receiving end of Bakugo's fury. On the first day of middle school, Izuku hopes for things to be different, for the school to be large enough that he might never see Bakugo for months at a time, for his own infamy to never precede him again. Unfortunately, hope isn't enough to change the world. Izuku sits in class, slumping at the sight of the name Bakugo Katsuki, written clear as day, 2 seats in front and 1 to the right of Izuku's own seat. Bakugo is in Izuku's homeroom. Nothing has changed at all. Nothing but the walls he's trapped in for the foreseeable future. Maybe his quirk is constant bad luck. A few days into his first year of middle school, something strange happens. An unknown student willingly approaches Izuku to introduce themselves. Izuku reaches out for a tentative handshake. As their hands meet, he has a random feeling, or maybe just a thought. Is it worth saying anything? He doesn't know this person, has never met them, but decides to swallow his fears and mention it anyway. "Hey, I'm IK and know we just recently met. And this is a random, possibly personal question. But is your quirk by any chance a mutation type?" Izuku is trying hard to suppress the urge to hide his face. He doesn't often have social interactions, especially with new faces. Yeah, actually it is. My bones are denser and stronger than most people." "How did you know?" The other student stares at him expectantly. I'm not actually sure. It was just a feeling really." Izuku's cheeks flush red, but underneath his embarrassment, he's ecstatic about having gotten so good at identifying quirks. The other boy looks at him strangely for a second. "Oh, okay," and awkwardly walks away. Izuku feels embarrassed at having already branded himself as weird to the unknown student. And that's before they know he's quirkless. Imagine after. But a small part of him is excited, wondering if it's possibly a quirk, his quirk, that gave him that feeling. Though the other part of him is admonishing himself over being hopeful about it. His thoughts and wistful thinking carry on through the rest of his classes, and he hardly notices when the bell rings, signaling the end of his daily prison sentence. While walking home, he's not quite sure how, or even if he's going to tell his mother about what happened. Surely it would be best to gather more information before verbalizing a false hope, right? Yeah, he'll try a few more times before making any claims. But how is he going to confirm his feelings without actually asking about it? It'll definitely need to be someone whose quirk he doesn't already know, but asking a complete stranger about it is awkward. Is there anyone he knows with an unknown quirk? No, apparently in a world where quirks are so prevalent and determine one's social standing, everyone makes it a point of making their quirk known. Well, it's decided. He'll just go about his regular life and make physical contact with anyone new he meets, then see later if his feeling was right when they ultimately share what their quirk is. Being the class nerd and having a rigid schedule prevents him from meeting new people very often. This might take a while. It's now been 2 days since his sixth sense incident, and he's not yet had the opportunity to try it again. If it weren't for the embarrassment immortalized in his head, he might have thought it was just a fever dream. Since it's Monday, he has Wing Chun after school. He'll have to make sure he focuses instead of pondering about his wish of a quirk. Wait a minute. Dojo. At the dojo, Deku told everyone to not use quirks, and apparently he's pretty stiff on that, since none of the people there even mentioned theirs. He could stop different individuals after training on their way out and talk to them, but it would probably be safer to just get approval instead of sneaking around. School isn't going by fast enough. Throughout the school day, he was extra careful to not get hurt by anyone, so that he can omit his self-aid portion of getting ready. He pedals home on his bike as fast as possible. When he gets home, he changes his clothes and puts a roll in his mouth to eat on the way to the dojo. He can't wait to get to the dojo, so he once again pedals as fast as is comfortable. He gets there slightly early, but almost all the students are already there. Walking over to the trainer, he mentally rehearses what he's going to say. Deku, do you have a minute? He tries as hard as possible to look casual, not determined, not angry, not exhausted. Midoriya, you look exhausted. Were you in a rush to get here? We don't start for 10 more minutes. Deku arches an eyebrow as he strokes his beard. Yeah, no, I was just excited for training today, that's all. He smiles sheepishly, but I was wondering about something. Yes? His eyes look inquisitively at Izuku, trying to determine what's being hidden. So, I know you don't allow quirk usage in the dojo. His voice starts an octave higher when he continues. But I was wondering if it would be alright with you if I ask some of the other students what their quirks are. You see, I have this notebook of his cut off by Deku. Enough of that, Shounen. You don't need to explain your whole life story. I've been here for almost half of it after all. He chuckles a little as Izuku slightly deflates. However, I don't see a problem with you doing that, as long as each person gives consent, and there are no demonstrations in the dojo, only explanations. He gives Izuku a nod and a sturdy pat on the shoulder to send him off. Although he has a few good acquaintances, he doesn't really talk to anyone about anything but techniques. It'll be awkward to walk up to someone and initiate an unrelated topic for the first time. He casually walks nearby to where a slightly older boy is stretching, and starts stretching himself. Kondon Uzunama. He's far better at Wing Chun than Izuku is. Kondon is a little bit taller than Izuku is, but not by much. Even so, they look completely different from one another. Kondon's golden yellow hair contrasts with Izuku's dark green, and his blue eyes give off a different feeling than Izuku's sharp green ones. So, Kondon-san, how have you been? We don't talk much, do we? He offers his hand to shake, and Kondon takes it. His feeling says it's an emitter-type quirk. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. I've been fine, I guess. Kondon replies while returning to his stretches. Anything in particular you wanted to talk about? Random topic. But I'm actually a huge nerd about quirks, so I want to learn as much as possible about different quirks, so... Izuku trails off for a second before continuing. What's your quirk? Oh, no, he was being so weird. Why did he say quirk so much? Honestly, it's kind of lame. I can make water shiny and reflective. That sounds like an emitter-type quirk to Izuku. Hey, that's actually kind of cool. How long does it last? Is it still safe to drink? Can you show me after class? Izuku feels himself rambling and decides that was probably 3 questions too many. I don't know, a while. I don't know. And sure, so far, Kondon hasn't seemed perturbed at Izuku's fanboying, so that's a good thing. It's still strange that after all these years, Izuku's been so focused on training his body and technique that he hasn't had any conversations with those at the dojo that weren't about Wing Chun. Izuku continues stretching, feeling awkward at the sudden silence. Is it too soon to leave? Would it be considered rude? Or maybe staying here in awkward silence is the ruder option? He weighs his options for about 30 seconds before finally making his leave. I'm going to go ask some of the others before class too. There are only a couple of students in the dojo who aren't already in conversation. It makes Izuku feel even weirder about never engaging his sparring partners in conversations regarding their normal, non-dojo lives. Right now, the one who looks most approachable is Nakajiki Natsuko. She, much like Kondon, is stretching by herself. Nakajiki-san, mind if I join you for a couple minutes? He hopes he doesn't look as awkward as he feels. Sure, I guess. Why? Also, you can call me Tsuko-chan. Nakatsuko is quite an interesting person during spars and demonstrations. She's so expressive in her movements, but in any form of conversation, she's impossible to read and almost deadpan. Izuku pushes his hand forward for a handshake. I actually wanted to ask you a question. Tsuko doesn't take his hand, instead opting to continue stretching. Izuku resolves his problem by turning the handshake attempt into the most awkward shoulder pat in existence. He's internally freaking out at how rude he's being, but he has to know if it's all coincidence or not. He feels like she has a mutation-type quirk. Strange, he didn't touch her skin. He only touched her gi, but it's still activated, assuming that she actually has a mutation quirk. She looks at his hand and arches an eyebrow. That's not too unexpected seeing as he technically violated her personal space. Hopefully she doesn't hold it against him. What's your question? Trying his best not to annoy her, he plays with his vocal inflections to be as kind as possible, if you don't mind me asking. Of course she doesn't mind. She implored him to continue. Would you mind telling me your quirk? I promise it's not for anything weird. Oh, sure. Her facial expressions aren't giving anything away, but she doesn't seem irritated. Put simply, heat resistance. It's not super strong or anything. It mostly just means I don't burn my mouth on hot food, and oven mitts aren't necessary, so long as I'm fast enough. That sounds really useful. And like a mutation-type quirk, he quietly mutters, you could totally be a great hero if you want to. Is that why you're learning Wing Chun? No, apparently I'm seen as unkind, so I had a tendency to be bullied when I was younger, and I grew up reckless, partially due to my quirk. Long story short, my parents started sending me here. Wow, for someone so non-expressive she really didn't care about sharing personal details. My mom says I'm reckless, too. Not to me, but I know she does. I don't really mind, but I don't really get it either, says the boy who made it part of his regular pattern to patch up his daily scratches and burn marks when he gets home. Izuku almost jumps when his teacher abruptly stands up calling everybody's attention. Everyone ready. Good, let's do attendance. Izuku quickly gets in line, shoulder to shoulder, as do the other students, to get ready for roll call. The line is organized by age, probably how it's organized in Dake Shishu's roll book. During their lesson and training, Izuku thinks about how his revelations are most likely a quirk, not just intuition, but having only tested it 3 times. And with there only being 3 possibilities of quirks, there's still a 1/27th chance it was luck. Unlikely for sure, but definitely possible even without a quirk. For now at least, he'll assume it's a quirk. Best case scenario, he's right. Worst case scenario, he's intuitive towards quirks. Either way, it doesn't make much of a difference. What are the activation requirements? So far it looks like physical contact. But he hasn't tried anything else, so it's worth experimenting. How does it classify a quirk as one type versus another? The 3 types aren't really based on anything. And all in all, they aren't very effective at classifying quirks, though there are some quirks that fit cleanly in one or the other. That isn't the case for the majority. If Izuku mentally creates a better classification, will this quirk follow his method or the legal one? If it follows the legal one, maybe there's more to it than he thought. But if it follows his mental one, it'll be more convenient. He'll definitely have to write what types and classifications he believes are better when he gets home, but for now he can theorize. The 3 legal types aren't useless and should still be a thing. But there are definitely some other categories that could be added. Improved intelligence quirks and information gathering quirks, like what Izuku's might be, are technically mutation quirks. But they should have their own genre. What to call it though? Informational quirks. That's good enough. And what about toggleable physical enhancement quirks? Technically they're transformation quirks, but no actual transformation takes place. They should be in a category just called enhancement quirks or something. Quirks that control or influence others' mental state or awareness are legally classified as being spread between the 3 based on certain characteristics they have. But they could, and should, all be put into one called psychological quirks. Certain quirks that can teleport things from one place to another are very rare, but they don't fit nicely into any of the other categories. It would be worth putting them all into their own category. Spatial quirks. Telekinetic quirks like Inkos are classified as emitter-type quirks. And it's not a terrible classification, but there's not really much of anything being emitted. They aren't very common, so having a genre for just them might be overkill. But this categorization is really only for Izuku, so it wouldn't hurt to have them on their own. Something that changes how an object is doesn't really make sense as an emitter type. Really, it would make more sense to call it an augmentation quirk, just in case there's something that doesn't fit nicely in these categories. There should be a catch-all. He'll just call them other quirks. Even though Izuku can't think of any that would fall here, it's best to have it instead of placing a strange quirk haphazardly in any of the others. It would also be best to be open to the idea of a combination of two categories, like if there was a quirk that increases intellect, but only under certain conditions, or is toggleable. That would definitely be informational, but it's probably also transformation or enhancement. So currently he has 10 categories: mutation, transformation, emitter, informational, enhancement, psychological, spatial, telekinetic, augmentation, and other type quirks. That seems like a good baseline to start off with. Now he just needs to see if his feelings will follow this revised clarification. Izuku starts feeling a little tired mentally, which is a little strange since he's definitely spent more mental resources on studying before. But he supposes that in those instances he hasn't also been practicing Wing Chun simultaneously. He doesn't realize he's muttering until another student calls his attention. "Midoriya-san, you good?" Izuku looks down from his thoughts to see a head of slightly gray, sky blue hair, and gray eyes looking at him. "Toggy Keishi." "Why yeah, sorry, I was just thinking." "And I'm guessing your thinking was too loud to hear Shishu's instruction." Izuku freezes for a second and rubs the back of his neck. "Well, lucky for you I'm here." Basically he wants you and me to spar, focusing on the second kata. Put simply, we'll critique each other. The second kata, Chumkyu, focuses on getting in closer to the opponent to find openings, recovering from stumbling, and destabilizing the opponent. It's useful all around. Sounds good. Thanks for the summary. Izuku shrugs lightly. So did he want us both to focus on Chumkyu, or just one of us? Both of us. He said even if one of us is less skilled than the other, it'll still help with regaining footing. That is half of Chumkyu, after all. Both Izuku and Toggy ready their stance, making eye contact with each other. They both make a countdown from 3 on their fingers simultaneously. When they lower their last finger, they both dash towards each other. Izuku pushes forward with a guard to see what Toggy tries first. Toggy goes for a palm strike which is easily blocked. But the moment Toggy's hand touches his forearm, a feeling enters Izuku's head, informational. Izuku pauses for less than a second, but it's enough for Toggy to take advantage. With a well-placed elbow strike on Izuku's side, he finds himself falling to the ground. He catches himself with his hand and starts spinning in place to shift his momentum away from the ground. As soon as he's recovered, he finds a hand flying at his chest. But he has just enough time to react and he deflects it to the side, offsetting Toggy's balance. For the next 15 minutes, they continue this back and forth. It ends when Dake Shishu calls the class's attention. That marks the end of your spar. Communicate with your partner what you noticed them doing well and what they needed to work on, then take a 5-minute break. Toggy turns to Midoriya grinning. Well, right off the bat, pausing on the first hit of a battle is not what you want to do. But other than that you've had me outclassed for the rest of the fight. Midoriya nods. And you did well at consistently off-putting my balance. The only critique really is that you seem to assume me being off balance meant I was defenseless. Yeah, partway through I realized that wasn't the case. He rubs his upper arm with his other hand. Unless you have anything else, I'll probably just go rest up. Oh, actually, I do. Midoriya nearly bounces with the energy he's put in his voice. I talked to a couple others already, but long question short, what's your quirk? It's called forecast. I always know what the weather is going to be like for the next few hours. Wait, so even right now, is it able to turn off? Midoriya is partially wishing he'd brought his notebook today since he knew he would be asking. But he'd be too distracted if he did. Yeah, if you were wondering, it's not going to rain for at least 5.5 hours. Toggy chuckles half-heartedly. It's not that amazing or anything. And no, I can't turn it off, but I can mostly ignore it. That's definitely an informational type quirk. Izuku's about to walk away before Toggy speaks up again. What about you? What's your quirk? Izuku jolts at that, like he just got jump scared. I've been. Well, quirkless my whole life. But part of me is thinking I might have an informational or analysis type of quirk. It's just hard to know, you know. Yeah, I guess. Ever since my quirk manifested, I've had a constant feeling nagging me all the time, but I thought it was normal for a few months. And if it's just general higher intelligence, it could be especially hard to notice any difference. It's definitely difficult to be sure, but the probability just skyrocketed. With now having 10 categories for him to categorize quirks, and having gotten it correct again, the chances of being quirkless went from 1/27th to 1/270th. That's less than 0.5% chance that he doesn't have a quirk. Even ignoring the possibility of dual-category quirks. Was he feeling these impulses all his life, but never noticed since he always knew someone's quirk before he came into physical contact? Or did it manifest late? Could it have been going off this whole time at the dojo but he was always too busy sparring to notice? He'd noticed it this time, but he was actively trying to notice it today. Even though he's always known that a dormant quirk could never be a powerful emitter type. or super strength. Now he knows that his quirk isn't suited to becoming a top hero like Endeavor or All Might. But at least he still has role models to look up to like Night Eye and Eraserhead. He's still left with the question of whether or not to tell his mom. After class gets over, Izuku barely catches Kondon before he leaves. Good thing too, because he grabbed a bottle of water on his way out, specifically to see this quirk. Izuku puts a hand on Kondon's shoulder, grabbing his attention before he could get into one of the vehicles. Instantaneously, a thought enters Izuku's mind. Augmentation. Kondon-san, I got a bottle of water here to test it out. Izuku's excitement is practically radiating off him. Great, let me see it. Izuku holds the closed bottle out towards Kondon. Kondon responds by moving his own hand forwards as well, palm facing towards the bottle. Izuku watches closely, and he sees the image from behind the water shift and become warped, until finally the water is completely reflective like a mirror. Whoa, that's so cool. Izuku exclaims. I guess. Kondon just shrugs and climbs into what Izuku can only assume is his parents' car. Izuku records the time that Kondon augmented the water so that he can see how long it lasts. Also, since his quirk gave a different category the second time, it definitely responds to his thoughts. At his house, Izuku gets a closer look at the shiny water. To start with, he pours it into a transparent cup to get a better look at it without the irregular shape of the bottle interfering. Immediately, he notices something strange. The water is completely reflective, except when he looks directly at the water at a perpendicular angle, it's entirely transparent. Being exactly at a perpendicular angle is difficult to maintain, so really it's just flashes of transparency every so often. It's trippy and disorienting, but he'll have to think about what that means later. Time to move on to another question he has. Is the water safe to drink? He pours about 30 milliliters out into a shot glass. Like a genius, he doesn't test it on anything else, and he drinks it. It tastes exactly like he would expect bottled water to taste like. That answers two other questions. It doesn't change the taste, and it retains its reflective properties even when separated from the rest of it. He records the time he drank the water down in his phone, so he can see how long it takes before he feels any negative effects. But based on the taste, he doesn't expect any. Part of him wants to stay up at night to watch it when, or if, it transitions back to normal during the night. But tomorrow's Tuesday, so he has to wake up for school in the morning. Thinking back on its flashes of transparency, and the way it looked while it was transitioning into its augmented state, Izuku has a theory on what's happening. Kondon's quirk likely changes the refractive index of water until it's so high that light bounces off unless it's completely perpendicular to the surface of the water. If this is the case, the transparency should only stretch out a certain distance, not the entire surface. That just means the radius of transparency is wider than the width of the glass cup that it's currently in. To confirm, he pours it into a wide bowl instead. When he reaches the right angle, he sees a flicker of the bottom of the bowl in its entirety. He moves closer to the bowl, and eventually the flickers of the clarity shrink in size until they're just a small circle of visibility in the part where he's looking. Pouring the water back into the bottle to keep it safe from spilling during the night, he cleans up his experiments. Izuku found out that he has a quirk, so he spent the day studying water. What a nerd. Izuku gets ready for school the following day, making sure to take his bottle of shiny water with him. It looks like gallium, but with lower viscosity. He might suspect it of being so, except that he already performed multiple tests on it. Hopefully none of the teachers will think he's bringing a harmful substance to class. As he's walking, he has to take a detour due to a villain attack. This villain has some sort of psychological illusion quirk, so the whole area is blocked off from civilian. Despite his best efforts, he's still late for class. Really makes him glad they stopped punishing students for being late due to villain attacks a few decades ago. Normally, it can be a little difficult to prove that the reason is a villain, but this time it's easier because other students are affected, and the story is already on the news. Throughout his classes, he keeps checking on the liquid, not enough to disrupt the lesson or stop listening to lectures, but enough to ensure it doesn't revert back to regular water without him knowing. Even as the last class comes to a close, the water is no less reflective than when it was transmuted the day before. Not that Kondon has any aspiration to become a hero, but if he did, and if the water remains reflective forever, he could totally use it as a keepsake or signature for fans to collect. Almost as soon as he gets home, he opens a blank notebook to write his new methods of quirk organization. He titles it Quirk Nomenclature. He writes down the different categories of quirks that he created the other day. He plans to create more categories to get further information from his quirk, so he leaves space for any future additions. He could add requirements for quirk activation, but a lot of the categories he's already made wouldn't end up getting split at all. For example, Izuku can't think of a single mutation quirk that wouldn't just be passively active, and the few that would get split up still wouldn't help him much unless he gets excessively specific in all the groups he creates. until he can create a more refined method of classifying activations. He'll just make 2 activation types that aren't tied to any specific quirk nature. The first activation type he creates is on touch. These would be quirks that require the owner to touch something to activate, like Izuku's. The other type he makes is externally dependent. These quirks would have some requirements outside of the wielder's control in order to activate. He chooses these kinds of activation groups because they're really the only kinds that he can feasibly protect against just by having the information. Hopefully his quirk will cooperate with his desire, and simply refrain from telling him anything if a quirk doesn't fit into either of these activation types. The quirk nerd in him wants to create more methods of specifying new quirks, but he needs to make sure that it's clean and intuitive. It doesn't do much good to have a category grouping that he won't remember. He doesn't even know if his quirk will utilize a group or category that he's forgotten. It's not exactly something he can test after all. He glances back at his bottle of water and sees that it's still shining, even after almost 24 hours. Having exhausted his reasons for writing in his quirk nomenclature book, he swaps it for his regular Quirk Analysis notebook, making full use of his day off from Wing Chun. When Inko arrives at the house, Izuku remembers that he never actually told her about his quirk. He knows that he'll have to, and that she will be really happy for him. But he also knows that him having a quirk changes everything. Eventually he readies himself and initiates a fateful conversation with his mother. "Hey, Mom," he says hesitantly. "Yes, Izuku." Inko's voice is inviting, with just a hint of hesitance. Oh no, he's worrying her. He decides the best way to break the news is to be gentle about it. Ease into the concept. "You know how we admitted me to the dojo because my quirk was dormant? Were you having second thoughts about going there?" Inko looks surprised, but not upset. "We can pull you out if you aren't interested anymore." "No, it has nothing to do with that, I swear." Izuku waves his arms out in front of him. Maybe he was easing into the concept too gently. "Oh, then what is it?" Her voice is soft and endearing, giving him the feeling that he can share any of his secrets with her. It steals his resolve in telling her. "It's just that." Izuku's voice becomes a quiet mumble, but he can't help but smile. "I think I might have found out what my quirk is." Inko freezes for a moment before perking up. "That's amazing. What is it? When did it appear?" She must be wondering which of his parents' quirks he got. "I'm not entirely sure when it appeared, but it's not exactly what you would expect." It continues. "It's Quirk Analysis. That suits you so well. I'm so happy for you." Inko adopts his smile for herself. "I know, I got really excited when I found out." His grin is stretching from ear to ear. "Quirk Analysis, huh? What does that mean?" Inko asks. "Well, when I touch someone I can tell what kind of quirk they have. I just never noticed because everyone already tells you their quirk." Izuku smiles sheepishly. "That's amazing, Izuku. Do you think that you still want to be a hero? With a quirk like that you could be amazing in many fields." Izuku gets the feeling she doesn't want him risking his life being a hero. "Yes, I'm sure that's what I want to be. If I refine this quirk I will be able to tell when I'm out of my depth, and if I need to get the help of others." Izuku attempts to assure Inko that he will be safe, even as a hero. "I'll start the paperwork to register your quirk, and let the school know." When he wakes up for school the next day, it's bizarre. He knows that it's normal for a teacher to tell the class when one of their students develops a quirk, but he never thought it would happen with him, let alone in middle school. It's clear to say that he's nervous as he walks into his classroom. No one there knows he has a quirk yet, but they're all about to. He sits at his desk, bouncing his leg to pass the time until the bell rings. On cue, the teacher stands up from her desk. "Everyone, I have an announcement to make." All but a few students turn their gaze to the teacher as she continues. It's very rare that a middle school teacher gets to make an announcement like this. So this is a first for me. Despite how energetic she is, her excitement doesn't reach the students. But one of the students in our class has manifested their quirk. Hearing this, the entire class turns to Midoriya Izuku, the only student in the classroom who was quirkless. Izuku tries to smile at the staring faces, but all he manages is something closer to a pained grimace. Even though everyone already knows that Izuku is the one who she's talking about, she finishes her announcement. "Midoriya-kun," she calls out, "would you like to come up here and tell everyone about your quirk?" She beckons Izuku to the front of the class. Izuku knows what everyone's opinion of him is. They all think he's worthless, and that his actions all stem from trying to compensate for his lack of a quirk. Walking from his desk to the front of the room has never taken as long as it has this time. With each step he feels self-conscious about the image he's projecting. He doesn't want anyone to think he's overconfident or disappointed with his quirk, especially when right now he just feels excitement regarding his quirk. He tries to use this as a veneer to conceal his current embarrassment while he's at the front of the class. "Hello, I'm Midoriya, but you already knew that," he mutters out. "My quirk is called Quirk Analysis. I can touch someone and know what kind of quirk they have. If Izuku remembers correctly, in elementary school, when someone shared their quirk with the class usually got excited, and they always wanted a demonstration. He's not entirely sure what he expected, seeing as a room full of middle schoolers is sure to get a different reaction than kindergartners and first graders, especially middle schoolers who have known and mocked him for years. What he wasn't expecting was for Bakugo Katsuki to raise his voice. TSH, as if Deku just wants to pretend he has a quirk, so he chose one that he can't prove. Even if he quote-unquote uses his quirk on us, it doesn't tell us anything, since he already knows all of our quirks. Izuku can immediately tell that the class believes Bakugo over Midoriya, and the few who don't, well, they don't make themselves known while Bakugo is in the room. Guys, it's real, I promise. I just didn't notice it for years since everyone tells their quirks right away. Izuku isn't actually sure if he had it back then or not, but he doesn't need the class to know that. Prove it. One kid yells at him, clearly persuaded by Bakugo. Izuku already knows what it's like to go around as the quirkless kid, but he doesn't want to know what it's like to be known as the quirkless kid who pretends he's normal. I know what might help, the teacher says, surprising everyone. Does anyone here know what my quirk is? She explains. After a moment of murmuring, the class determines that no one does. Well then, Midoriya-kun, go ahead and use your quirk on me. The teacher stretches out a hand to bridge the gap between her and Izuku. So, Izuku mutters, my quirk won't tell me exactly what your quirk does, but it will tell me what type of quirk it is. That's all right. I'm sure it will be enough. She calms him. Izuku touches her hand and a thought enters his mind. Transformation. He quickly retracts his hand and turns to the class. Sensei has a transformation type quirk that can be used whenever she likes. Already, having created the externally dependent category has provided him information. This time it was through its absence. The entire class looks back at the teacher to see her confirm or deny his claim. I'm afraid, she turns and looks at the class, that you all were wrong to judge Midoriya-kun. My quirk lets me increase or decrease my height by about 7 centimeters. She demonstrates to the class by becoming a little bit shorter in front of their eyes, then returning back to normal. She's willing to let the students know what her quirk is, but she's not going to tell them that she just revealed her real height. Not her shortened height. It's a good thing for her that Izuku's quirk isn't developed enough for him to know that. Tusk, whatever, Bakugo calls out. Nerd just had a lucky guess. Fortunately for Izuku, it would appear that the class believes their teacher over Bakugo. Over the next few days, Izuku notices that at least some of the students are treating him like a person now. Bakugo, however, is pissed that he was proved wrong in front of the class and is out for revenge. Izuku doesn't mind that his previously childhood friend turned childhood bully is upset with him. Maybe in another lifetime he would care. But with what he's learned at the dojo, he knows that Bakugo isn't actually someone he cares about keeping in his life. When the last class of the day gets over, Bakugo confronts Izuku at his desk. It seems that the class Deku thinks he's worth something now that he's got a useless, fake quirk. It's not fake, and it's not useless either, Katsuki. Bakugo becomes enraged by Izuku's audacity, having used his given name without honorifics. Quirk Analysis has a multitude of uses in hero work and otherwise. Izuku starts picking up his things when Bakugo grabs his bag. Seeing Izuku flinch, Bakugo scowls with sparks popping from his free hand. Don't call me that. You're lucky I let you call me your ridiculous pet name all those years ago. You're not lucky anymore. When Izuku remains silent, Bakugo fills the gap. I bet you conspired with the teacher to convince everyone about your ruse. He claims, your mommy probably complained to the school, and they planned on a way for you to fit in. Another moment of silence passes. Whatever, I can pretend for a second that you're not lying, Bakugo mutters. So then, what's this? Bakugo asks, grabbing one of his Quirk Analysis notebooks. You've been writing books called this for years, and you're telling me you just happened to call your quirk the same thing. I call bull. Bakugo waves Izuku's book in the air. Even if you have a quirk, this just means that you've known about your quirk this whole time and thought you were too good to tell us. Bakugo flips through the notebook, stopping at one of the more recent pages and starts reading it aloud. Reflection seems to persist for 38 hours. He turns back to face Izuku. What kind of crap is this? Please give that back, Bakugo, Izuku finally says. And for your information, that page is on someone's quirk who augments water. Tusk, whatever, I'm leaving before your uselessness rubs off. Consider this a warning, Deku. Bakugo sets the book down on Izuku's desk, and sparks crackle in his hands as he walks away. Over the next few months, Bakugo keeps confronting Izuku, but he can't seem to make up his mind on why. Sometimes he berates Izuku for all the years he was hiding his quirk, but sometimes he calls Izuku out for creating a fake quirk. Izuku doesn't mind much. Bakugo's opinion stopped being relevant to him years ago, and as long as he knows his own quirk, he's not upset by what others think about it. His quirk has led him to pursue knowledge on quirks even more so than before. Browsing online, he reads that people's quirks get more powerful the more they are used. Logically, it makes sense, and he's sure he's been subconsciously aware of that. But now he's thinking about how his quirk might get more powerful. The conclusion he lands on is that the only way his quirk will get more powerful will be by him actively refining his method of quirk organization. It's not too upsetting, but at the same time it feels like he has extra work for less pay than what some other people get. Bakugo doesn't need to spend hours thinking about his quirk, he just has to blow things up and he gets stronger. At least Izuku enjoys learning and studying quirks. He wonders if a person's personality and quirk are tied together. Even before Izuku discovered his quirk analysis, he was analyzing quirks. And even before Bakugo had manifested his, he was loud and hard to miss. It could be that quirks are based on a person's genetic personality. But he also knows that a large part of a person's personality is shaped by their environment. So it might be more likely that a person's quirk affects their personality, like it's pushing them to be like their quirk. If that's the case, it could explain why so few people have a dormant quirk, since the quirk would be actively trying to make itself known. It would also mean that it's not entirely Izuku's fault that he's a nerd. Izuku leaves the dojo and his heart sinks as he sees the empty space where he knows he parked his bike. Yes, he's long since outgrown it and his knees would hit the handlebars unless he angled his legs awkwardly to the side as he rode. But it's still not a pleasant feeling to be stolen from. He double-checks the area around the dojo to confirm he hasn't simply parked it away from his usual spot, then leaves in a huff. Hopefully whoever stole it at least needs it more than he does. Since he's walking home anyway, he makes the best of it. He decides to pay attention to the details that he hasn't noticed in years. It's amazing how different the same path looks when you take it a little bit slower. When you take it a little bit lower, he notices that the flower pots in front of the florist are all different sizes, that the alleyways are a little bit wider than they appear at a glance, that the voices of small school children don't get drowned out by the sound of the wind in his ears. But the biggest difference he finds is that when he takes it slow, he doesn't have to focus on where he's going as much as where he is. He walks home at a leisurely pace, only barely needing to look forward every so often. Someone else seems to share the same idea of not looking where they're going, something Izuku only discovers when he crashes into a red-headed girl, spilling small boxes in their hurry. Quirkless. The word enters his mind before he has a chance to process what it means. But then he realizes how much of a revelation this truly is. Not specifically about the girl's quirk, but of Izuku's. Despite having never specified a category for the quirkless, his quirk still recognizes it. Izuku wants to say something to her, or help her pick up the boxes on the ground, but she's already up and running by the time he tries to open his mouth. It's wistful thinking, but hopefully he'll get another chance to talk to her. Even though Izuku's not actually quirkless, he thought he was for a long time. The quirkless is a group of people that he most relates to. Thinking back to his revelation, it would appear that Izuku's quirk relies on his subconscious thoughts. Even though he never actively created a place for the quirkless in his mind, he always thought of them as different from quirked people. After all, that's what people have been telling him for years. He isn't bigoted against them. He just recognizes their differences, the same way that a mutation quirk is different from an informational quirk. This small revelation carries with it a large answer. Izuku doesn't need to remember each and every category he creates. With that in mind, he can think of other forms of organization that might be a little bit harder to remember than categories. He had a thought a while back about creating sets of tags that his quirk can identify. Basically, any information he could get from a yes or no question can be set up as a tag. In effect, it's a very binary system. He previously decided against using them as it seemed like an inefficient way to calibrate his quirk at the time. But he's just learned that it doesn't matter as much as he thought. He can create any number of sets of tags, and as long as his brain has seen or thought of it clearly at least once, it should take effect. This small revelation was in no way insignificant. Izuku arrives home, looking all too happy for a kid whose bike was stolen today. He can already smell that dinner is basically ready, having, unsurprisingly, gotten here later than usual. Tadema, he calls out. Oh, Izuku, you're home. You're usually here earlier. I almost started getting worried. Inko comes out from the kitchen to greet Izuku. Yeah, sorry about that. Is that curry? It smells amazing. Izuku sets down his bag and takes off his shoes. Yeah, it is. It got done just a few minutes ago, so I've just been keeping it warm until you got here. They both get the table ready together and start eating when it's set. So why were you home later than usual? Inko questions. Oh, my bike sort of. Wasn't there when practice ended, so I walked. He smiles sheepishly. You seem to be in an awfully good mood given what's happened. Yeah, I sort of decided to just take the walk slowly and enjoy myself. And I think I got more information on my quirk on my way. Izuku explains. Plus, that bike was getting old and a little bit small for me. Whoever took it probably just wanted to get something for their kid or something. Inko just stares at him for a moment. Of course, only you could be happy about being stolen from. My little ball of sunshine. She smiles at him. Are you going to be needing a new bike then? That would be nice, he admits, but it's not as necessary anymore. My middle school class gets out earlier than it did in elementary. Plus, I can walk faster than when I was 8, if you say so. His mother replies. Izuku spends the evening writing down different tags that he thinks would be helpful, since he doesn't intend to remember exactly what all of them will be. He needs to give them a name that will be easy to understand what it's conveying. It wouldn't be very useful if he called 2 different tags by nearly identical names, because he'd definitely get confused. The first 2 that he creates are active and inactive. These just supply the information on whether or not the specified quirk is currently being used. He decides this information would just be redundant with passive effects, so they won't apply to those quirks. He then creates ones that specify which part of the body the quirk affects. The first one is whole body, and if this one checks positive, none of the other body specifications will check. He then creates ones for each part of the body he can think of. Now if he finds someone whose quirk qualifies as on touch, he can tell which part or parts of the body to be careful about. Out of curiosity, he creates one more tag. If it works how he thinks it does, it would grant him some notable information on quirks in general, as well as his own. The nerd in him wants to make more, but he's noticing a form of lethargy that he's never felt before. It's as if he is both tired and in perfect condition at the same time, with the majority of this phantom fatigue focused on his head. Is this quirk exhaustion? Modifying the way that his quirk classifies quirks must exercise it as well as actually using it. He's definitely writing that down. He knows it's not exactly the same thing as most other people's quirks, but he's still proud that after knowing about his quirk for less than 6 months, he's already improved so much. Part of him is wondering how far he could have taken it if it had made itself known when he was in kindergarten. He'd certainly have gotten near the limits by now, right? It really forces him to think about his future. If he intends to become a hero through his dream school, UA, he'll need to work a lot harder than the others around him. He'll essentially be fighting Quirkless after all. And even though he'll be able to understand what a villain's quirk is, he'll still have to deal with it, unlike the pro hero Eraserhead. Some part of him is aware that it's been months since his quirk became known at school, but it still feels weird to know that summer break is already coming up. His quirk has so seamlessly blended with his lifestyle that it's hard to believe there was a time he wasn't aware of it. On his way home from school, he thinks about how he can confirm his theories regarding his latest tag. He doesn't have practice at the dojo today, so he has time to try something. When he gets home, he dresses in his casual clothes and lets Inko know he's going out for the day. He doesn't say where because he knows that his mom would get excited and tease him and want to come with. No, he's not going to tell her that he's going to the park. He chooses a park on the good side of town and waits. He doesn't want to look suspicious, so he doesn't hide around. Instead, he waits on a bench. Since sitting and waiting around isn't the most riveting of things, he spends most of his time reading. At first he wanted to bring his notebook to take notes, but a middle schooler watching a playground of little kids while taking notes isn't the image he wants to portray. He sits on the bench for a few hours, making sure to listen to the conversations that parents have around him. Time seems to slip from Izuku faster than he expected, something that he only becomes aware of when the temperature drops and the sky casts deep oranges and reds across the clouds. With the sun setting in front of him, he gets up and leaves. His information will have to wait for another day. He sets aside time in his schedule for the foreseeable future, dojo every other weekday, and reading at the park on the others. One day while waiting at the park, he hears something that sounds like a villain fighting somewhat nearby. He wanted to go check it out, but what if the thing he's been waiting for happens while he's gone? He can't just cast aside all the time he already spent on this theory. He's lucky he still looks young enough that playing at the park would only be minutely strange. He's also lucky that after only a few weeks, he overhears the conversation that he's been waiting for. I'm just getting worried, he hears one mother say. She's almost 5 and we don't have a clue about her quirk. I'm sure it'll show up, they always do. Another reassures. At this point, Izuku stands, barely able to hide his eager smile. Bouncing in excitement, he nears the conversing mothers. Hi, I was just reading over there. He points to the bench where he previously sat, and I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. He sees the confused looks on their faces and rushes to explain. Not to overstep or anything, but I think I might be able to help. Hopefully. You see, my quirk is Quirk Analysis, which basically is, well, I can tell the general kind of quirk someone has when I touch them. And it won't hurt my daughter, will it? She questions. No, of course not, he exclaims. She won't feel anything at all. Well, she'll feel my touch, but it won't be like a thing. Izuku's face turns red at his rambling. The worried mother reluctantly calls over her daughter. When she runs over, her mother explains what Izuku said earlier. More or less, Izuku confirms, "Can I see your hand?" The little girl hesitantly reaches out her hand, and Izuku calmly lays his own hand on hers for a second. Nature emitter. Tags inactive. Affects hands, not manifested. Izuku retracts his hand and starts explaining. She does have a quirk, it just hasn't manifested yet. If you're wondering, it's going to be an emitter-type quirk from her hands. He turns to the little girl. That means that when it does manifest, you'll be able to send something out from your hands. That's going to be a really cool quirk. The little girl smiles, looking at her hands. Izuku can't help but feel her contagious happiness. The mother thanks him. And the little girl looks excited, talking about what kind of things she'll be able to shoot from her hands. Izuku can't help but grin as he walks away. Not only did he help a little girl and his mother, he finally gained his information. As soon as he arrives home, he can't help but run to grab his notebook. He wants to write it all down while it's fresh in his mind. The first conclusion to be made is that a quirk is predetermined, even before it manifests itself. The second conclusion to be made is that Quirk Analysis can gather information from a quirk that hasn't manifested yet. The third, and most important conclusion, is that he can still help people with a quirk like his. Even with the off chance that he can't become a hero, he could become a quirk specialist. That way, he can help people find their dormant quirks before they leave adolescence. It's almost as if his quirk was specifically designed to help others more than himself. Not that Izuku can complain about that. At dinner, Izuku is lost in thought, only slowly eating, as if it's only his secondary objective. Inko notices something is up and decides to ask him about it. Izuku, is something on your mind? She asks hesitantly. Yeah, I was just thinking about how amazingly useful my quirk is. I'm really glad you're so happy with it, but I'm also confused, Inko admits. I realize that your quirk works so harmoniously with your personality, but what makes it so useful to you? Well, admittedly, it may not be very useful for me, but imagine if that doctor we visited had a quirk like mine. I would have known right away that I have a quirk, and what kind it was, even if it hadn't manifested back then. Izuku's eyes carry a peaceful gravity to them. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. Inko thinks for a second before continuing. I guess that means there's more than one way for you to become someone's hero. Yeah, I guess so, Izuku agrees. After eating, Izuku goes to his room and continues his thoughts. He's had his quirk for less than a year, and already he feels he's accomplished so much with it. He knows that little girl likely doesn't even think of him having done much for her. But he can't verbalize how much he wished for someone like him to come around when he was younger. For someone to tell him he isn't broken, that he's not a less than. Oh, how he wished for someone to tell him everything would be all right. Instead, he got people apologizing that his dreams were unobtainable, people pitying him for not having what everyone else had, and eventually, people avoiding him for not giving up when his hopes were barely living off life support. Before he realizes it, tears are streaming down his face. He isn't sure if the tears are for the sorrowful reminiscing of his past, or for the changes in his life he's finally able to grasp for himself. Either way, sometimes it's good to shed some tears, and some burdens too. Izuku goes to school greeted by an angry Bakugo, who's already throwing insult after insult at Izuku's face. What are you going to do when you guess someone's quirk wrong? When someone's quirk is too complicated for even the great nerd to understand. He says nerd like one would ironically say majesty. When that day comes, it just means I need to polish my quirk more, nothing else. Izuku explains, rolling his eyes. Right, your quirk. Bakugo rolls his eyes in return, accented with the sound of explosions. Look, Katsuki, I don't care what you think. You can keep wasting both our time, or you can actually do something of benefit for once. Or is that too heroic for our resident bully? As often as it backfires, sometimes it's fun to poke fun at Bakugo. He's found that the best way to counteract any of Bakugo's arguments is not by presenting a differing opinion. It's by simply explaining why his argument doesn't work. It works great, because not only is he making Bakugo not want to be there, but he doesn't offer any ideas for Bakugo to scrutinize himself. As much as Izuku would like to be able to walk off away from Bakugo, it wouldn't solve anything seeing as they share the same class, despite the majority of people being, at least noticeably, kinder since his quirk was revealed. His relationship with Bakugo has not improved to say the least. Izuku knows it's not his own fault, but a small part of him wishes he could help Bakugo see that he's not lying. By the time class gets over, Izuku can't wait to get out the doors of the school and enter the doors of his dojo. He hasn't really made time in the dojo to learn anyone else's quirk, and even of the ones he does know, there are still some unknowns. He enters the dojo early once again, ready to learn more about his fellow practitioners of Wing Chun. The first person he sees is once again Kondon, but Izuku has already studied his quirk as far as he's able, and Izuku is starting to think Kondon is getting annoyed by him. Tagi is already there too, maybe he could talk to him? Last time he talked about people's outside lives at the dojo was really awkward, except for with Tagi. Even though he already knows Tagi's quirk, it could get him more used to talking with the people at the dojo. Hey, Tagi, he finally brings himself to say, how have you been? Honest answer or polite answer? Tagi says with a slight groan. I would normally say honest, but I'm curious. Why not both? Alright, in that case, I've been doing great. Tagi pauses for a moment. But honestly, I'm swamped with homework right now. From which class? Izuku asks. Mostly math. I just can't figure out how to do it. If you want, I could help you out with it sometime. Izuku offers hesitantly. You sure? Won't that just be like extra homework for you or something? Not really. I mean, you're only a year younger than me, right? What grade are you in? Izuku questions. 6th. Yeah, so that would just be like a review of last year. If you're sure. Normally I get my older brother to help, but he's studying for high school entrance exams now. So early. The school year isn't even half over. Izuku stops himself before he starts rambling. I'm guessing you don't particularly want me to come over tonight, do you? If you want, I can give you my number and you can message me to set up a time tomorrow. Izuku smiles, pulling a pen and a note from his pocket. Sounds like a plan, thanks. Also, do you just carry a pen and note cards with you all the time? Tagi grins. Well, why yeah. Yes, I do. Izuku admits. Izuku hands Tagi his number on a card, and they start stretching before the lesson starts. That is, after Tagi stops laughing at Izuku for being a nerd. Izuku's getting ready for school when he's greeted with a message on his phone. Unknown number. Hey Midoriya, right? Already knowing that it's obviously Tagi, Izuku hurriedly replies. Midoriya Izuku. Yeah, and I'm guessing that you're Tagi-san. Unknown number. Got it in one. Having confirmed his belief that it is indeed Tagi messaging him, Izuku adds him as a contact and sets up a chat with him. Midoriya Izuku created a group chat with Tagi Keishi. Midoriya Izuku changed Tagi Keishi to Weather Boy. Weather Boy, really? Also, why a group chat? Midoriya Izuku. 1. It fits. And 2. Because who knows, maybe we might want to message with other people from the dojo or school. Weather Boy. You know what, I'll keep the name. But you asked for it. Weather Boy changed Midoriya Izuku to number 1 nerd. Izuku finishes getting ready as Tagi sends him the details for tonight. Even though it'll be nothing more than a glorified study session, Izuku finds himself surprised at how excited he feels. Has it really been so long since he'd gone to a friend's house? Is Tagi even technically a friend yet? Izuku told his mom last night that he would likely have plans for this evening, but he makes sure to remind her before he leaves for school. Throughout his classes, Izuku finds himself just waiting for class to get over. For the first time in years, Izuku has after-school plans on one of the days he doesn't have dojo. As soon as the last bell rings, Izuku nearly darts from his chair, only to be stopped by a group of students, a certain explosive hand blocking Izuku's path. Oi, Deku. Bakugo grits, I know what you've been up to. What do you mean? Izuku stutters out. These past few days. Bakugo shouts. You think I haven't noticed you sneaking out as soon as the bell rings? You're not subtle at all. It's obvious you're trying to hide from me. Now I need to show you what happens when you do. I really have tea to go, Izuku pleads. Oh, in that case. Bakugo grins. You should let me beat you up quickly. One of the other students grins and starts saying something, but cuts off abruptly when Bakugo glares at them. Izuku glances over to see that the teacher is no longer in the room. He isn't exactly sure why. His last teacher of the day isn't as kind to Izuku as his first teacher. Even if he did see Bakugo and Izuku, he wouldn't do anything to stifle Bakugo's growth. The teacher's presence, or lack thereof, doesn't make much of a difference. Bakugo reaches his arm out to Izuku's face, hand sparking. His movements are slow and easy to predict, but Izuku doesn't want to do anything that could get himself in trouble, so he doesn't push it away or counterattack. Instead, he just brings up his arms to take the brunt of the sparks. In what little smokescreen it gives, Izuku grabs his bag and leaps across the desks to get to the door as fast as he can. The low expectations Bakugo places on Izuku pays off as his face shows his surprise at Izuku doing anything remotely cool. It's a good thing he never shared that he takes martial arts. Outside the classroom, Izuku slows down to a brisk walk, lest he get in trouble for running. As he nears the end of the hall, he hears Bakugo shout from class, "Deku, you're dead." Before anyone can see where he goes, Izuku goes out the window and holds himself dangling from the ledge. There's no way that Bakugo would ever think Izuku would hang from a second-story window. He hears Bakugo and his posse run past the window and turn down the stairs. A few seconds later, Izuku pulls himself up and back onto solid ground. He's successfully avoided detection. Well, Bakugo's detection. A glance out the window shows a group of spectators who saw the whole hanging from a window thing. Bakugo's definitely going to find out what happened, and he is going to be pissed. All Izuku can do is make sure he's not there when it happens. Finally safe from Bakugo, Izuku wipes down the burned areas on his sleeves and goes through the school to a different exit. He's really lucky that middle school gets out earlier than elementary. He wouldn't want to be late to get to Taga's place. Once home, Izuku inspects his uniform. Luckily the burn marks are really light, They should wash out relatively easily. Knowing that his mom isn't going to get upset at him, he changes into casual clothes and grabs anything he thinks he might need. He debates bringing his old 6th grade math books, but eventually decides it would be overkill. Tagi likely has them or doesn't need them in the first place. Izuku walks out of his apartment looking at the address on his phone. It's a bit of a distance, so it would take a while on foot. Instead, he looks up the train schedule to find the correct station. He boards a train, showing his student ID in lieu of payment since he attends school in this city. It's only a 4-minute ride before he's walking again. When he finally gets to what he thinks is the right address, he looks at the exterior of the house. They have an actual house, not just an apartment. It's not excessively large, but definitely more than what he and Inko would need. There's dark yellow paneling for the walls, and windows on either side of the door as well as some above it. Eventually, he knocks on the door. A moment later, the door opens, showing an older teenage boy with light gray hair, looking bored and disinterested. Hi, is Tagi-san here? Izuku feels so weird talking to a stranger who already looks done with the conversation before it started. No, the door closes in his face, leaving Izuku dazed as he hears footsteps behind the door. A second later, the door is open again, this time revealing Tagi Keishi panting, and the previous boy laughing behind him. "Nice-san," Tagi exclaims. "That wasn't very nice." Izuku's face goes red, and his body non-responsive. Tagi turns to Izuku. "You can come in, I told them you were coming." And someone, he glares playfully at his older brother, thought they would be funny. Tagi wouldn't admit it to Izuku, but he did think it was a little funny. Ignoring his own confusion, Izuku walks inside. Immediately, he's greeted by a woman with cyan hair, presumably Taga's mother. "Midoriya-san, I assume," she says. "Keishi-kun says you're here to help him study." Yeah, he said that he wanted help with math," Izuku replies, mentally scolding himself for stuttering right off the bat. She puts her hand out for Izuku to shake. When he takes it, his quirk activates. Nature emitter. Tags inactive, whole body. "Well, Midoriya-san, I don't know how long you plan on staying, but if you need, you can stay for dinner. I might take you up on that," Izuku absent-mindedly replies. Taga's older brother now turns to Izuku, still laughing from before. "Sorry about earlier, but you should have seen your face." He's chuckling between words. "I saw you standing outside whispering to yourself for a while. You looked confused already and I couldn't help myself." He puts his hand in front of Izuku for a handshake. "Tagi Atsugao, but around the house you can call me Atsugo-san." To avoid confusion, Izuku takes his hand, once again receiving a feeling from his quirk. Nature mutation. Tags whole body. Tagi once again starts talking to Izuku. "Oh yeah, and you can call me Keishi-kun around the house. Let's go up to my room and get started." Izuku mindlessly agrees. The inside of Keishi's room is remarkably tidy, and everything seems to follow a sky theme. His bed in the corner is a clean white color, along with the nearby dresser and the cubbies on the wall. The walls are painted a light blue, giving it an open feeling, despite the room not being particularly large. Through making his observations, Izuku manages to break out of his stupor. "So, what part are you struggling with?" Izuku asks. "We started this new thing with shapes and stuff, but it's almost like a word problem," Keishi complains, pointing to a worksheet. Izuku was surprised years ago when he first found out so many people struggle with word problems. They didn't seem much different at all to Izuku. "Let me see it." Izuku grabs the worksheet and reads the first problem. "So what can you understand already? And what part is confusing?" Izuku asks. "Well, I get that I have to get some information from a cube, but I'm not sure what information or how to get it. It would be easier if it showed a diagram." Keishi explains. Keishi places the assignment on his desk and sits in the chair. A moment later, Izuku realizes there's not another seat in the room. Instead, he opts to kneel next to the chair. He then goes through, explaining what part of the phrasing tells him what he needs to do, and leads him through the steps of actually solving it. "And that's how you find the volume and surface area of a cube," Izuku says. "Great, now I just need to do it 3 more times," Keishi jokes. "It'll go faster now that you know how to do it, I promise." Yeah, I know." "Hey, Keishi, do you know why teachers assign homework?" Izuku asks. "So that we become conditioned to working both on and off the job for when we become part of the industrial machine." Keishi deadpans. Izuku chuckles a bit. "Well, but there's also other reasons," Izuku explains. "If they didn't give out homework, your entire grade would be decided by test scores. So in that way, it's a form of leniency. The other, and more important reason, is that it gives you more practice with subjects that might be hard to grasp in a single lesson. They could just be lenient without forcing extra work." Keishi grumbles, ignoring the second reason. "But I can see why the extra practice might help." They both understand that the fact of Keishi needing help is an example of why Izuku's right. and with that help, they get to the end of the assignment fairly quickly. Are there any parts that you think you could use some extra practice with? Izuku asks. I can create an example problem for you if there is. I think right now I understand it well enough, but I also feel like my brain might explode if I try to cram in any more information right now though. Izuku puts a hand to his chin, jokingly responding. That sounds reasonable. The conversation rests for a moment before Keishi starts it up again. Hey, did you decide whether or not you're staying for dinner? It's going to rain in little over 4 hours, so if you stay you might need a ride home. I forgot to think about that, Izuku admits. Also, I told you that your quirk is useful. Oh right, with how much of a school nerd you are, I forgot that you're also a quirk nerd. Keishi jokes. Izuku's face becomes slightly flushed. Yeah. Speaking of which, would you be willing to tell me your family's quirks? Keishi thinks for a moment before making his decision. Yeah, I guess they wouldn't mind too much. My mom can increase the humidity around her, and my dad is quirkless. I inherited a quirk from my mom's side, and my older brother inherited from my dad. Wait, do you have more than one brother? Izuku asks, confused. No, you saw him downstairs. He's not quirkless, Izuku claims. Midori Keishi is cut off by Izuku. He's not quirkless, Izuku repeats. Keishi adorns a confused face. What do you mean? You saw him for all of 3 minutes. How would you know? Remember when I told you I thought I had an analysis quirk? Keishi nods and makes a sound of approval. Well, I know how to use it now. When I touch someone, I can feel what kind of quirk they have. Atsugo-san isn't quirkless. Wait, he's not. What is his quirk? Keishi looks both serious and confused. My quirk doesn't tell me exactly, but he has a mutation quirk that affects his whole body. Izuku explains. He doesn't look like a mutant, Keishi mutters. Not all of them do. Did you know that Tsuko-chan from the dojo has a mutation-type quirk? As soon as Izuku finishes, he realizes that Keishi's statement was likely rhetorical. No, he admits. Do you think we should tell him? Or would it be rude? You know him better than I do. I think he would want to know, but I'll tell him after you leave, just in case he responds poorly. I don't think he will, but he's never been told anything like this, Sue. Keishi explains. All right, not really knowing what else to do or talk about, Izuku decides to go home before dinner. Izuku gets home elated. It had been a long time since he had gone over to someone else's house, and the last time that he had, well, it was Bakugo's house, so visiting the Tagi household was nice for Izuku, even if it was just to act as a sort of tutor. Izuku hopes that Keishi's older brother is doing well with the knowledge that he has a quirk. Part of him is worried that the sudden knowledge will be too much on his mind when he's trying to think about his high school entrance exams. It wouldn't be as big a deal if Izuku was able to explain exactly what the quirk was. But as it is, Izuku needs to develop his own quirk before that will be possible. With that goal in mind, he creates a few more tags to specify more information. This time the focus is on tags that would likely only exist in mutation-type quirks. The first one he creates is self-protective. This would apply to any quirk that increases a person's resistance or protection against some kind of harm, like Tsuko's quirk which increases her protection against thermal damage. This wouldn't apply to quirks like Bakugo's which indirectly would protect him, but really only through intimidation. The second tag he creates is aesthetic. This would apply to quirks that cause some form of visual change, without increasing or decreasing what a person can do. Izuku expects that this tag won't necessarily be all that useful, since it's telling about something that's already visible. But it's also possible to hide in some cases. The third and fourth tags he creates in this set are limiting and limit breaking. Like their names, these are quirks that either limit what a person can normally do, or increase the capabilities of a person without limiting in any way. A quirk that adds extra appendages could be limit breaking if it increases what a person can do. But if those appendages can get in the way, it would instead be limiting. Beyond these, he can't think of any other tags that would be helpful for identifying mutation quirks without getting confusing or excessive. He does plan to eventually get excessively specific. But not yet, he wants to ease his mind into that. For now, his mind needs rest. Izuku can't help but check his phone every so often. Keishi hasn't messaged Izuku yet about his older brother's reaction. Even as he's getting dressed and ready for school, he spares a few glances at his phone. All through his daily walk to the school he's thinking. He makes his usual mistake of focusing on his inner world instead of the outer one. But is it really his fault this time? Izuku knows what it's like to have his world turned upside down at the prospect of learning that he has a quirk. Was it really fair to force Keishi to apply these same changes to his older brother? Izuku hardly acknowledges what's going on around him, regarding it with disinterest, if at all. Maybe he should make it a habit of watching his surroundings, because as he nears the schoolyard, Bakugo's hand finds its way to Izuku's shoulder. Deku, he shouts, I heard about your little stunt the other day. Did you really think you could deceive me like that without any consequences? Izuku responds in confusion. What? You got amnesia or something? Well, remember this. The next time you hide on the other side of a window, I'll make sure you don't come back inside the same way. Realization dawns on Izuku as he remembers what Bakugo's talking about. No, you've got it wrong. I wasn't, it was. So you're saying you didn't hide on the outside of a second-story window? Well, maybe. Okay, so maybe you don't technically have it wrong. But I just had somewhere to be yesterday. Alright, since yesterday didn't work out, I'll let my buddies know to schedule you in for today. Bakugo smiles like a psychopath in case the implied violence wasn't obvious enough. With that, Bakugo departs from Izuku. As the school day progresses, no matter how hard Izuku thinks for a way out, he can't think of anything surefire. He'll just have to see what they try to pull today, and scrap something together. Just as expected, as the last class of the day lets out, Bakugo and his cronies corner Izuku's desk, pretending to not notice what is happening. Izuku continues putting his things away. Despite Izuku not having any real power over the situation, it's funny watching them get mad when he ignores them. Plus, if they think Izuku is absent-minded and non-perceptive, they won't expect much out of him. Lower expectations make them easier for him to manage. Oi nerd, Bakugo spits out. I hope you're not busy. I went and rounded up the crew on your behalf after all. Come on, gee guys, Izuku pleads. There's like 2 weeks left until break. Can't we stay out of each other's hair? And then afterwards, you won't even need to see me anymore. What's that? You want us to stay out of your hair? One of the side bullies asks, grasping Izuku's curls. I guess with a head of hair as messy as yours, you get everything stuck in there. Yeah, another bully agrees. I bet that's where you keep all your creepy hero facts and worship. Shut up, you extras. Bakugo shouts. Don't you know that you're just here to show Deku here that he's worth even less than you? I couldn't care less about what you extras think. All except Bakugo freeze in place. The one who grabbed Izuku's hair is now slowly releasing it, as subtle as he can. That's what I thought. Now then, Bakugo turns back to Izuku. You might not have gathered it just yet, but we're here to make sure you don't pull a stunt like yesterday ever again. Izuku swallows his throat. He's too intimidated to even put his last book back into his bag. So here's what's going to happen. Bakugo continues. You're going to sit there quietly while we have some fun. You like watching us have fun, right? You must, since that's what you did all throughout grade school. Creep. The situation that Izuku finds himself in isn't the most comforting place to be. He knows that, and yet, he can't help but get lost in his mind. He thinks back to all the times Bakugo's referring to. He didn't realize that the others thought he was creepy. He just didn't know entirely how to integrate into the games they played. He thought, at the time, that he should wait for permission. Was it more intrusive that he simply waited all those years ago? Izuku is forced back to reality when a smoldering hand slaps down on the only book remaining on his desk. To start with, Bakugo says, you wasted my time yesterday, so now I'm wasting yours. Bakugo picks up Izuku's notebook, letting a series of conflagrations go off in his palms. By the time he sets it back down, the notebook is completely discolored and barely held together. Izuku doesn't know if it will survive even being picked up again. Just so you know, that book is what you'll end up like. Nerd. Izuku walks home battered and bruised. His notebook took the brunt of Bakugo's ire, but that certainly doesn't mean that Izuku got out unscathed. At least his sleeves were rolled up, skin heals itself, but his uniform doesn't. All this time, Izuku thought they picked on him for being quirkless, but now he isn't quirkless, and it still happens. And from what Bakugo said at school, it sounds like that was never the entirety of what was going on. Is it possible that even years ago, Izuku was seen as more than just his quirkless status? That him being presumed quirkless all those years was just the cherry on top of why they didn't like him. Ever since he became aware of quirks, quirks had become everything to him. They were everything to everyone else too, right? In preschool, everyone always talks about what quirk they might get, and they talk about other people's quirks basically every day. Or is it just that since Izuku would always talk about quirks when he was younger, that's the only thing others talked to him about? Partway home, Izuku remembers that he has to go to the dojo today, so he picks up the pace. A light jog should help make up for his late departure and slow start from the school. Part of Izuku wishes he still had his old bike, but the bruises from hitting his knees on the handlebars only recently healed. Maybe it was a blessing after all. Even so, he gets to his house only a little later than he usually would. After quickly getting ready, he heads out the door, heading for his dojo. He might be a little late, but since it's better to be late by a few minutes than dead tired for the entirety of the lesson, he keeps to a light jog rather than a straight sprint or run. He arrives at the dojo a few minutes past roll call. He eagerly wants to ask Keishi if he's already told his older brother, but at the same time doesn't want to get on Shishu's nerves by interrupting class. The students are working on the usual warm-ups, and Izuku easily joins the rest. The familiar stretches calm his racing mind and give him something to focus on besides his fresh burns. The class proceeds with blissful regularity, though Izuku is disappointed he isn't paired with Keishi for sparring practice. He is paired with a Kanaka, a golden-haired boy he doesn't know very well. Izuku hasn't had much opportunity to spar with the larger boy, and thus hasn't had the chance to analyze his quirk either. Upon his first strike, the thought comes to Izuku: nature, emitter, tags, inactive. Mentally noting that this assessment is incredibly uninformative, Izuku resolves to refine his tagging system later. The spar itself goes relatively well until Izuku makes the mistake of blocking one of Akinaka's strikes with his burned arm and flinches away, which costs him the fight. Akinaka apologizes for knocking him down and offers his hand to help him up. As the class continues, Izuku keeps waiting for opportunities to ask Keishi about his brother. He doesn't find a good place to bring it up until the cool-down exercises at the end of the day, but that will have to do. Keishi-kun, Izuku calls out in a hushed voice. Oh, so you've decided we're on a given name basis now? Keishi teases. Izuku now realizes that when he was initially instructed to call him by his given name, it was dependent on being in the Tagi household. Sorry, I just thought that and then I forgot that you know. Sorry, relax, it's no big deal. Besides, it is usually the upperclassmen who can decide the honorifics. In this case, that would be you, if you couldn't tell. Keishi smiles at his comment. Izuku sighs in defeat, before remembering why he wanted to talk. Anyways, I was wondering, how did your conversation go? Izuku finally mutters out. Keishi blinks. Conversation. The one I just had with Santo-san. We were just going over how to improve my stance. I'm still a little rough on Form 3. No, not that. Izuku says in a rush. I meant your conversation with Itsugo-san. Oh, right, Keishi says. It went well. Izuku waits, but it doesn't seem that Keishi is saying anything more. Care to elaborate? Nah, Keishi says. Izuku is about to awkwardly change the subject when Keishi laughs. I'm just kidding. He didn't believe me at first, which is to be expected. But then I teased him into submission. You what? Izuku isn't sure what that even means. Don't worry about it. But, yeah, he's good. It would be nice if your quirk would give more information, though. Keishi jokingly jabs Izuku's side. Izuku recoils as if it hurt. Yeah, I'm working on it. When Izuku arrives home, he decides that, whether he was joking or not, he ought to keep his promise to get better at using his quirk. He previously planned to continue with making tags that would help specify aspects of quirks, especially non-mutation ones, since he already made a few for those. But if he does, then that won't net him any extra information on Keishi's older brother. Even if he polishes his quirk, he has to remember his current goal is to help with Itsugo-san. If he gets distracted, he won't be able to see the results of his efforts until much later, despite how much he'd like to expand on the emitter-type tags. He eventually relents and resolves to make tags that relate to mutation quirks in at least one way or another, even through simply being a general tag. He wanted to make some tags relating to a person's quirk factor, since that would give him an idea of how developed someone's quirk is. But he has no idea what those units even mean or how to quantify them. Knowing that someone's quirk factor is 100 doesn't grant him anything if he doesn't know whether that's high or low. Although, if he does create sense of tags like this, he'll eventually get a good idea of how it works through experience. With his decision made, he decides that getting this information through tags isn't necessarily the best way to do it. If he wanted to get a specific quirk factor level, he would need a new tag for each one. But if he just decides that the quirk factor is part of the information that he wants, subconsciously his quirk should tell him, even if he isn't entirely sure how to classify it, where it's not a category or a tag. Knowing that, he decides to look up what some of his favorite heroes' quirk factors are. Unfortunately, it seems that none of that information is public knowledge. Not that he can blame them. His only remaining option is to just use Quirk Analysis to check the levels of those around him, and create a sort of baseline for quirk factors. The easiest place for Izuku to start is to see if he can see what his own quirk factor. Now that he thinks about it, he never actually used Quirk Analysis on himself before. He's definitely made physical contact with himself before, and with others he never has to think about activating it. It just happens. Izuku places his right palm on his chest and focuses on using his quirk on himself. A few seconds pass and nothing. He doesn't receive any revelations about himself. That's unfortunate. Either his quirk doesn't work on himself, or he just doesn't know how to consciously do it. The next few times that Izuku uses Quirk Analysis on others, he'll pay attention to how it feels. For now though, he's tired from school, from dojo, and from thinking. He needs to sleep now. The next morning, Izuku gets ready for school. He's slightly looking forward to it. It is the perfect place to use his quirk and pay attention to how it feels. For someone whose quirk is literally Quirk Analysis, he doesn't really understand his own quirk all that much, which is fair, given that he's had way less time to actually use said quirk. But it was definitely something he should work to rectify. When he reaches the schoolyard, he just needs to touch someone, anyone, and then focus on himself while doing it. Of course, the first person Izuku sees is Bakugo. He really should have expected this, seeing as they live in the same neighborhood. This could either go really well or really poorly. Scratch that, there's no way this goes well. But at the same time, this could be a good opportunity to find out what Bakugo's quirk factor is. For how developed it is, it's probably in the hundreds. His idea would definitely irritate Bakugo, though. Izuku of course likes to bug Bakugo, just a little, but at the same time, if he goes too far and gets Bakugo too mad, it could spell trouble. Izuku, being one to push his luck, walks right by Bakugo, giving a small pat on the shoulder, not staying long enough for Bakugo to understand what happened. Nature emitter. Tags inactive, affects hands. Quirk factor 37. Pretending he doesn't hear Bakugo's fury radiating from his hands and mouth. He thinks about how it felt. Really thinking about it, he notices that it was more than just a thought entering his head. There was also a feeling in his stomach, like energy was leaving his core, only to be replaced by a different form of energy, but not in a way that feels draining or tiring. But now focusing on the results of his analysis, he looks at the quirk factor part. Even Bakugo's powerful quirk has a quirk factor of only 37. With a quirk more developed than most adults, Bakugo should have a relatively high quirk factor, which logically means there's a lot of people with quirk factors crammed within the 1-36 range. Then again, Izuku doesn't even know if the quirk factor scale is linear or exponential. A linear scale would mean the space between each unit is massive, and the work required to even get from a quirk factor of 1 to 2 would be impressive. But an exponential scale would make sense as well, getting progressively more difficult to earn each successive score. That's another thing he'll have to look more into when he gets back home. Though starting his day by antagonizing Bakugo will ensure that the day will not pass by very quickly. For the first few classes, Izuku notices Bakugo glaring at him. At least, he does the few times he builds up the nerve to look over. He's planning something. That much is obvious. What that is, though, Izuku doesn't want to find out. Near the end of class, as it gets closer to the bell, Izuku gets his things packed up early. He doesn't want a repeat of yesterday, getting caught due to being slow. Stress rises in his gut with each consecutive tick the clock makes. If he remembers correctly, the clock in this room is 17 seconds slow, which means the bell will ring at 43 seconds instead of on the minute. Hopefully Bakugo doesn't know that, seeing as he's aggressively staring at the clock as well. The second hand hits the 40-second mark, and Izuku uses Bakugo's fixed gaze on the clock to start silently leaving his seat. He takes a couple steps before the bell rings. Bakugo's reaction tells Izuku that he did not know the clock was slow. With his head start, Izuku is the first out of the classroom. Seeing the adjacent classroom door open, Izuku decides to hide behind it so that Bakugo won't find him. The students leaving the other classroom give him strange looks, but the people leaving his class don't even notice him. As planned, Bakugo rounds the corner, headed towards the lunchroom, evidently believing Izuku to be there. That resolves his problem, but introduces another. If Bakugo's expecting Izuku to be in the lunchroom, what can he do? He could skip lunch, like what he'd do in elementary school, so Bakugo wouldn't steal his lunch money. But it's been a while since he's had to do that, so his body isn't used to skipping meals anymore. He instead decides to take the long way around to the other entrance to the cafeteria since it's closer to where the food is served, but further from most of the seats. The journey is largely uneventful, but as he nears the doorway, he can hear Bakugo's shouts even over the lunchroom chatter. He takes a quick glance through the doors, thanking his luck for the wall of people blocking his line of sight to Bakugo. He himself makes his way to the back of the line, and the whole way through, he's fearing for the chance that he's found. With his head ducked, he orders his meal and sits on a stool at a table. Though the table's surface was really just a ledge extruding from the wall, the only thing to look at was his food and the wall. His fear of Bakugo slowly fades as he eats, instead finding himself remembering the past. Lunch had just started. Izuku was happy that he'd finally shared his quirk with the class, and Bakugo was upset that their teacher convinced the others to believe Izuku, or as he'd put it, took Deku's side. "Hey Midoriya-san, use your quirk on me," one of the students called out to Izuku, though their name eluded him with the school year having just started. Izuku, of course, obliged, and proceeded to give student after student their results. Mutation, emitter, augmentation. Wait, that's not a normal kind of quirk. Izuku couldn't tell who said it, but he'd felt the need to explain anyways. Most everyone else probably had the same thought. He told them about his different classifications, and how he's trying to make more and more specific ones to improve his quirk. This quickly led to many of the students wanting to know if they fall into any of the weird categories, as one student called it. By the time he'd finished talking to them about it, Lunch period was almost over. He'd nearly forgotten to eat in all the excitement. Nearly. The next day, the appeal had worn off to many though. It was no longer a shiny new toy, though since they knew he had one, Izuku found himself able to fit in with others more. The day after that, there were none who sought him out anymore. If he wanted to sit with others again, he'd need to actively decide to. But he didn't know who or where to go. It was much easier to just find a quiet place. Sometimes it was nicer too, even if it wasn't as exciting. And the overall disdain held at large towards Izuku in elementary school had diminished now, although there weren't any that he would call close friends. There are few acquaintanceships consisting simply of pleasantries when passing in the hall. In the end, it felt very much like nothing had really changed, but at the same time, everything just fit together how it should have in the first place. A particularly loud yell from Bakugo pulls him from his memory. It doesn't seem like he'll have to worry about it though. It doesn't seem to be directed at him. He's safe. Well, for the duration of lunch at the very least. When the bell rings and class starts, it confirms that his mission has succeeded. He'd managed to avoid Bakugo the entire period. When the last dredges of class finally trudge to their daily end, Izuku makes an eager dash to the door, with Bakugo staring at him in class. He assumes that whatever he planned to do during lunch is probably worse now. Not that it matters when Izuku leaves unnoticed. Either that, or Bakugo purposely let him escape this time. When he makes it home, he immediately claims the spot at the family computer to look up how the scale of a quirk factor works. Sure, he could have used his phone to look up the information while he was walking, but the interfaces are just cleaner and easier to navigate on a desktop. He looks up whatever keywords he thinks would be related to how a quirk factor is measured, or whether it's measured linearly or exponentially. But once again, there was no information listed online, except the fact that a higher number means a more developed quirk, which is something he already guessed. Oh well, at least he can try using his quirk analysis on himself again. He once again places his palm on his chest, but this time he remembers back to how it felt when that energy changed in his core. He consciously allows that transfer to occur, and with that transfer of energy, his quirk activates. Nature, informational, other tags, active, on touch. Quirk fac. His vision is obscured with a blinding white, cutting his revelation short. Strange. Normally all the words come at once. He can't seem to form any further thoughts on the topic, only able to focus on the endless white that's both hazy and too sharp in image. He tries to get a better idea of where he is and what's going on, but can only think about his splitting headache. If it could be called a headache when it encompasses the space everywhere between his scalp and his shoulders. His consciousness feels like it's being torn apart, forced to think about everything, without the choice to think about anything. Evidently, he doesn't have the energy or mental resources to figure out what's going on. All he can process is pain and confusion and white. He's not sure how long he's kept in this blank prison, but a moment later, or maybe several minutes later, his body goes completely limp. His vision changes from a blinding white to an oppressive black, and all thoughts cease. Izuku wakes up in his bed, his headache just as bad as it was before he fell asleep. As his vision clears, he sees his mother sitting in his desk chair, which is now turned to face the bed. He can tell from the visible creases on her forehead that she's worried and exhausted. Of course, Izuku's quirk would send himself to unconsciousness despite not doing anything externally. Sounds about par for his luck. Mom, Izuku asks, breaking in out from her thoughts. Oh, you're awake. Yeah, how long have I been asleep? A sheepish smile finds its way onto his face. Well, that depends. When did you go to sleep? Her tone and phrasing kindly ignores the fact that she must have found him unconscious on the floor before moving him to the bed. I don't exactly remember. Well, it's just past 7 now if that helps, Inko offers. So that would mean I was out for almost 3 hours. Well, you must have been exhausted then. Want to come down and eat? Izuku gets out of bed, ignoring the pain his head gives him, and follows his mother to the dining room. Absently eating his dinner, he ponders the earlier events. Why did he pass out from using his quirk? Why does he still have a headache? And why did his quirk classify as informational, other? What's the other part of it? As much as he wants to learn the answer to the last questions, the first two might be easier to solve. Maybe his quirk connects to another person's quirk in a sort of energy exchange. For example, he uses his own energy to connect to the quirk in the first place, but then draws upon their energy to get the information. If that's the case, it would make sense for him to use enough of his own energy to lose consciousness, since there was no other party for him to get it back from. And as for the second question, having low energy could easily cause a headache, so maybe that makes sense too. But why does my quirk classify as more than just informational? He whispers to himself. Could it be the movement of this energy that may or may not even exist? But even then, wouldn't that just classify as emitter, or augmentation, or enhancement, or however it works? He used his quirk to try and get more information and a better baseline on how a quirk factor is measured. But instead he got a lot more questions, a splitting headache, and a worried mother. and it didn't even tell him what his own quirk factor is. Either that or his mind just turned off before he could remember it. But based on Bakugo's quirk factor, Izuku's is probably like 4 or something. Oh well, it's not like he'll try to find out again anytime soon. Luckily tomorrow is Sunday, so he won't have to go to school with a headache this bad. Now that he thinks about it, why is he able to measure someone's quirk factor? It isn't exactly something that he knows what the units are, and he has no examples to draw from. With his tests regarding the categorization of quirks, he determined that it's his own perception that his quirk conforms to, not the legal or societal perception. The only conclusion he can come to is that a person's quirk factor is not a social construct like the categories, but instead an intrinsic property of how quirks function. How interesting. Izuku, are you all right? Inko asks. You're muttering up a storm over there, and you've hardly touched your food. Izuku finds himself back in reality. He's not sure how long he's been staring at this fish. Sorry, he says meekly, earnestly shoveling food into his mouth to avoid elaborating. He's sure glad he didn't try Quirk Analysis on himself on a day that he had dojo. That would have been embarrassing for sure. How would he explain it? Oh yeah, I'm just a nerd who nerded too hard and passed out from energy consumption. The next day, Sunday, Izuku finds himself spending the entirety of it in his bed. His head hurts too much, and his body finds itself lacking the energy to do anything even if he were to try. Maybe he shouldn't have ignored the pain last night to have dinner in the dining area. As it is now, even analyzing and forming hypotheses takes too much out of him. On Monday, he's starting to show signs of recovery. His head still tries to kill him whenever he moves his eyes, but his body now has enough energy that he's at least physically capable of pushing through it. If he were to make an analogy, it's as if yesterday he was an arm but the bones were crushed to 100 pieces, extremely painful and can't be used at all. But today, it's like the bones are only fractured in 3 places, extremely painful, but if you push through it, you could still technically carry something. School passes in a blur. He can't even remember what the lesson was on. He's not looking forward to it today, but he does have dojo as well. He walks home, but he can't really remember doing so, just that his legs are sore now and feeling lethargic. He doesn't even know if Bakugo confronted him today. When he does a once-over in the mirror, he doesn't get a definitive answer. After getting ready as fast as he could, he makes his way to the dojo. When he walks in, it's clear that he's pushing himself well beyond what he should be. He's not entirely sure what he looks like, but if it's anything like he feels like, he won't be able to get through today without any comments about his well-being. Sure enough, when attendance is called, Izuku finds himself being told to go home and rest. That is definitely something he can do, but it also means that he has to walk home again, and that's not something he finds himself particularly wanting to do. When he finally makes it home, he has to force his legs to not give out on him as soon as he enters the front door. He may have made it home, but it's not a good idea to let Inko come in on him unconscious on the floor again. Having successfully made his way to his room, he just about makes it to the bed before his legs give up. Izuku doesn't remember falling asleep, but he's not surprised that he did either. But what he is surprised by is that he's waking up to his alarm clock. His alarm clock. That means he slept through the whole evening and night. And now he needs to get up and go to school. Part of him is annoyed that he has to wake up so early, but another part of him is glad that he always sets his alarm to an hour before school starts, because today, he's definitely going to be needing that extra time to get ready. His body also makes sure to let him know that he didn't have dinner yesterday, and that it's mad at him for doing so. School once again goes by in a blur, but this time he can actually remember a little bit, not about the lesson, but just that he wished he was not there, and that he enjoyed lunch more than the classes. He is pleased with the fact that he isn't scheduled to go to the dojo today, though he might have actually been allowed to stay today, but probably not. When he arrives home, he knows that he could push himself and actually do something, but he'd rather rest and get back into top shape. When Midoriya Izuku comes home one day, she finds her son sleeping on the floor with the computer on. Just based on the topics on the screen, she can't ascertain whether he was researching for school or for his hobbies. After she manages to lay him on his bed, she waits in his room so she can ask him how he is and what happened when he wakes up. But that plan goes out the window the moment he opens his eyes. She can tell that he's still a little out of it. Maybe he'll get better tomorrow and she can ask him what happened. Instead, she offers him dinner. If he's fallen from what is presumably exhaustion, he'll need the energy. Throughout the meal, Izuku's muttering like mad. At least, his mouth is moving, but the sound doesn't make its way across the table. After weighing her options, she decides to bring it to his attention. But he just apologizes for it and stays quiet for the rest of the meal. And eventually that silence is sustained the rest of the evening as he goes to bed. The next morning comes, and he remains in bed. Inko's glad that today's Sunday. Otherwise she wouldn't be able to watch over him throughout the day. She stays near his room all day, occasionally bringing in food or drink when he's more awake. Hopefully whatever he has isn't contagious. But even if it is, Inko would still help nurse him back to health. though she knows that he's somehow even worse off than he's letting on. He always tries to make everything seem alright even when it isn't. When nightfall comes, her son still isn't any more awake than he was earlier, and tomorrow he'll have to go to school. Hopefully he'll be alright. Even if she tries to stop him, she knows he'll go anyway. She could physically prevent him from going to school, but she would eventually need to go to work, and he'd probably just leave anyways after that. When the morning does come, she can hear Izuku getting ready for school. Wishing him luck at school, she does a once-over to ensure he's not going to faint while he's there. Concluding that he'll be alright, she reluctantly lets him go. But that doesn't stop her from worrying while she's at work. After work, she walks through the door and sees his shoes already at the entrance. He's not at the dojo. That's one thing she's happy about. But when she enters his room to check on him, he's already asleep. Something tells her that she'll never have the chance to ask him what happened. The next day, Tuesday, he also spends its entirety in bed after school. If he's still out of it on Friday, she'll call the hospital. Izuku wakes up Wednesday morning, once again to the sound of his alarm going off. His headache has noticeably improved, only barely noticeable now, but his body is still heavy. At least now he can push through it. That's especially important since he has dojo today. At school he can finally, at least partially, pay attention. Enough that he knows that he would be behind in his studies if he weren't ahead before. All of his actions are tiring, but finally possible. He can just about go through his daily activities. Just slower. School gets out, and before he can leave the schoolyard, he finds himself confronted by a familiar sparking hand. "Oi, Deku, you got something wrong with you or something?" Great. Of course even his bullies noticed something was up. Izuku, though, isn't quite spirited enough to deal with this today, so he feigns ignorance. His low physical energy makes it easy to pretend to be confused. What do you mean, who? Bakugo spits out. I mean, who do you mean? Good. Just respond to his questions without actually answering him. Deku, you pile of turd. You trying to make a fool out of me. His palms are sparking erratically, fluctuating with his increasing anger. Izuku, trying his best not to laugh, decides to take this fun to the next level. Even if he doesn't have the stamina to deal with this typically, with each taunt he makes he feels a small increase to his dopamine, even if it's not real energy. He'll take it nonetheless. I'm not him, Izuku deadpans, his tired face looking like it's full of disgust. Oh yeah, Bakugo tries to poke holes in Izuku's argument. Then what's your quirk? It's obvious from the grin on Bakugo's face that he expects to win no matter how Izuku responds. But Izuku just got internally elated. This is the perfect opportunity to just make up the stupidest response. Izuku knows that Bakugo doesn't believe him, but that's part of what makes this perfect. Izuku turns around and explains, I can walk on walls when certain conditions are met. Bakugo now looks done with the conversation and asks mockingly, oh yeah, what conditions would those be? Well, if the wall is thick enough, I can walk along the top, or if the wall has fallen over I can also walk on it. Do you think I'm stupid? Bakugo yells. Anyone can do that. Oh yeah, Izuku affirms, I guess you're right. Whatever, you really are useless. Having made his case, Bakugo stomps off, leaving a slightly giddy Izuku on his way home. Izuku is very glad that his headache isn't as prevalent today. He definitely wouldn't have been able to have that conversation yesterday. He still has a little trouble believing he just talked back to Bakugo. Something's wrong with Deku. These past few days he seemed so out of it, like his world came crashing down. He's just been so empty. Not that Bakugo cares or anything. Of course he doesn't. But he can't break someone who's already broken. And today when Bakugo went to talk to him about it, he got all snarky. Deku got snarky. Something definitely happened. The last time he got all blank-faced was when that so-called doctor told him his quirk was having trouble showing up or something. Yeah, Bakugo knew. Even if Deku didn't outright tell him, he could tell something was up, so he asked his old hack. Back then he sorta got out of it on his own, but he became an even bigger nerd when that happened. Hopefully he doesn't come out of this spell with snarky being his new personality. There's already enough brats at this stupid middle school. Either way, something's up with Deku, and Bakugo doesn't know. Stupid Deku. Now that Izuku has the option to push through the fatigue filling his body, he should be able to make it through dojo without being sent home. Pushing his luck, and carrying the laughter brought by his earlier conversation with Bakugo, he walks into the dojo. He's sure he still looks a little tired, but not nearly as much as he had the previous few days. When taking attendance, Dakuruki stops at Midoriya's name. He looks closely at Izuku, and after a moment of consideration, he moves on to the next name on the list. That means he passed, right? Surely he's in the clear now. Attendance ends, and still no comment from Shishu. Definitely a success. During a lull in their exercise, Keishi starts talking to Izuku. Hey man, how are you? Better than yesterday. You didn't see me yesterday. Izuku points out. Keishi smiles and responds, you don't know that. Izuku smiles in return. Okay, stalker. Keishi laughs for a moment before turning more somber. But seriously, on Monday, you didn't look all that great. Is everything alright? Yeah, I'll be fine, Izuku explains. I can tell you about it later. Did you need more help with homework tomorrow? Keishi thinks for a second, then responds, I don't need help, but it would be appreciated. Thanks, cool, because that was also low-key me wanting to hang out at your place. Yeah, I could tell. You're not as subtle as you think you are, Keishi points out. Izuku sighs in defeat, and they both get back to exercising. The next day after school, Izuku takes the train to Keishi's house. His knocks are greeted by Keishi at the front door. Midoriya-san, come on in. Keishi steps to the side, holding the door open for Izuku. Hi. Izuku looks around and sees Keishi's mother, but his brother isn't there. Hello to you too. Come on, let's go up to my room again. Keishi directs. He follows Keishi up the stairs and into his bedroom, just as clean as the last time. Oh look, I got something since the last time you were here, Keishi explains, pointing to a beanbag. Because last time, there weren't enough seats so we worked on the floor. Izuku pauses for a moment. You got a beanbag. I don't think that's a good seating arrangement for working. Maybe you would have trouble using it, but I can work in any conditions. And just that good. Keishi points his nose up as pompously as he can. That's so cool. Izuku grins at Keishi's horrified reaction to his obvious sarcasm. I'll totally put that to the test later. A mischievous glint finds its way onto Izuku's face. Oh no. Oh yes. Keishi spends a couple seconds regretting his decisions. But Izuku changes the topic. Oh, also, really, you called me Midoriya-san. What? Am I like a stranger to you? Oh, sorry, Izuku-chan. Never mind. Let's go back, Izuku groans. They both laugh and joke around for a minute or so, Keishi eventually changing Izuku's title to Izuku-kun, even though Izuku is older than Keishi. So, is your older brother mad at me for telling you guys he has a quirk but not what it is? He's not mad, especially not at you. But if you were wondering if he'll act weird around you, don't worry, he's still plenty busy studying for high school entrance exams. You might not even see him very often, Keishi explains. That's good, I mean. Not that he has to study so much for the big tests. I'm sure he's put in a lot of work, and Izuku stammers out while his face turns red. Luckily for him, Keishi interrupts his rambling by bringing up his hand. Chill, I know what you mean, he says with a slight grin. The conversation takes a short dip. That is until Keishi remembers that he has a question for Izuku. So Izuku-kun, he starts, you said you'd tell me what was going on with you on Monday. Right. Oh yeah, that, well, it wasn't really something that happened on Monday. It actually happened on Saturday, but it just lasted a while. Not that I even expected anything to happen in the first place. Hold on, slow down. So something actually happened, you didn't just get sick, or forget to sleep or something. Yeah, Izuku basically squeaks out, sounding more like a question than an answer. Well, I'm waiting. What happened? Keishi jokingly taps his foot impatiently. You know my quirk, the Quirk Analysis. Yeah, that. I kinda tried using it on myself. Why? Don't you already know what your quirk is? Keishi questions. Well, that's the thing. I thought I understood it, but now I'm not sure. What do you mean? Well, Izuku explains, at first, it didn't even work on myself, even if I tried to. But then, when I actually got it to activate on myself, the results were weird. Weird how? Keishi looks more and more invested as the conversation continues. Well, I created a classification for quirks, one that's more in-depth than the legal one, and I found that my quirk uses my mental one. Okay, and one of those categories is other, quirks that don't quite fit in any other category. And yours is other. Keishi guesses. Not exactly. Even weirder. I mean kinda. It was classified as informational other. Basically, it means one aspect of my quirk is about information, but there's some other aspect that can't even be described by my current classification. Weird. But how does that relate to you being a zombie 2 days ago? Alright, so, when I used my quirk on myself, I passed out and had a raging headache for like 4 days afterwards. Even now my body feels super tired. Wow, Keishi looks at Izuku with concern. Don't believe me? No, I do. Please don't give a demonstration. My mom would grill me with questions if you passed out here. Mine would too, Izuku replies. Oh wait, I never even told my mom about what happened. She just knows I was out of it for a while. Really, dude? Really? You're hopeless, you know that. Keishi chuckles. I really gotta tell her tonight, don't I? Izuku grabs his face with his hands, pulling downwards. Yeah, you really gotta. Keishi agrees. The conversation goes through another lull, the both of them sitting in comfortable silence. A moment later, Izuku speaks up. So, I hope you didn't tell your family I was just coming over to help with school again. Izuku taps his index fingers together like a little child. Yeah, no. I mean, you outright said you just wanted to hang out. Plus, if I told them we would be doing schoolwork, we'd actually be doing schoolwork. I'm just responsible like that. I hope you're not trying to imply I'm not responsible. But either way, I didn't think that would be the case. I was just making sure that I didn't distract you or pull you away from what you wanted to be doing. As if you could do that, Keishi argues, smiling madly. We both know that if I wanted to do something you'd just let me, and that if you wanted to do something, I could stop you with a single word. Keishi now has a big gaudy grin on his face. What? Izuku laughs. That's not how it is at all. Worth a shot, right? Keishi pleads. I guess even if you are the biggest nerd I know, you still have a little backbone. A little bit of one anyways. Izuku picks up the beanbag he had previously been sitting on, threatening to throw it. Those two facts are not correlated. Keishi's smile turns mischievous. Already Izuku knows he must have said something that could be exploited. So you're admitting that both you being a nerd and you having a weak backbone are facts? Izuku relents, his defeat verifying the fact of being a weak-spine nerd. Izuku can only hope that his mom doesn't get upset when he eventually has the conversation with her. Though that's entirely dependent on how Izuku can portray his thoughts. Worst case scenario, she hates his quirk and forbids him from using it in the future. Best case scenario. Well, he can't actually think of any scenario that's objectively amazing. Really, the best thing Izuku can think of is it just being treated as a normal conversation. But that's not going to happen, is it? Izuku opens the front door and calls out, Tadema. Akari, how was your visit with Tagi-kun? She asks. It was fun, Izuku admits. But I also remembered there was something I needed to talk to you about. Inko's face is a mix between worry and excitement. Something tells Izuku that she already knows what he's going to say. Remember when I was sick? Yeah, Inko affirms. Her expression makes it evident that she knew where this was going from the start. Well, I kinda, sorta, maybe know why. Oh, really? What kind of response is that? This is hard enough and awkward enough without having to completely guide the conversation. I think I overexerted my quirk. Izuku finally admits. Overexerted your quirk. How? Izuku has to admit her response makes sense. He would have never considered overexertion as a possibility with a quirk like his. I tried to analyze myself. Izuku explains, ... and I passed out. Inko raises a finger to her chin. I see. You're not mad? Izuku questions. No, why would I be? Inko returns the question. And Izuku's face starts turning red. Well, I thought no reason. Inko smiles. If you say so. That went remarkably well. Inko is pleased when Izuku finally tells her what made him sick. Though it breaks her heart that he was so nervous to talk about it in the first place. Is he worried that he's forbidden to use his quirk somehow? Or that she'll be upset with him for bringing it up? She hopes, as awful as it sounds, that the nervousness is something intrinsic to himself rather than something she inadvertently caused. She does have to laugh at the way he brought it up though, as if she'd forget that time he was sick. Not only was it a very concerning experience for her as a mother, but it very much lasted until yesterday. Her mind continues to ponder other ways he could potentially exhaust his quirk in the future, ways that she hopes he never experiments with, such as analyzing thousands of people in a day, or attempting to analyze an inanimate object. She almost cautioned him against trying any of those things before he left the room, but she knows she would only be giving him ideas. As smart as her son is, he has very little self-preservation and way too much curiosity for his own good. But analyzing himself, she isn't sure why that would be enough to exhaust his quirk. Granted, she doesn't understand his quirk as well as Izuku would, but something seems strange about the idea. Luckily, since his quirk would have analyzed itself during the process that made him sick, it's very unlikely he'll need to attempt it a second time. It scared her half to death to come home and see him collapsed on the floor like that. Hopefully, he never tries to analyze himself like that again. Izuku really wants to analyze himself again, but there's no way he'll be able to anytime soon. Even if he didn't have to worry about school, he doesn't want to miss dojo. So he can't even follow through with his half-formed plan of attempting it during summer vacation. And anyway, it's been half a week and his body is still recovering from the aching stiffness. That means, even if he puts himself out of commission during a weekend, the recovery period will ensure he's in suboptimal condition during the following week. Maybe someone could pretend to be Izuku. No, that's dumb, and wouldn't really solve anything even if it did work. The way he sees it, this will have to be a mystery he can't solve. At least not right now. But if he can't analyze himself anytime soon, he'll just have to spend that time getting ready for when he can. He needs to polish his method of quirk organization. He needs to create more tags. At this point, it has become a sort of game of guess and check. Izuku has to guess what kind of tags to create, and then eventually check, or rather, self-analyze and potentially hinder his mental capabilities for a few days again, since there's no obvious direction on what tags he needs to specify. He decides to just create tags for different aspects he thinks are cool. The first tag he writes down is self-perceptive. This tag would apply to a quirk which grants the user increased information on either the status or position of the user. Izuku assumes that this might apply to Quirk Analysis. since he can technically use it on himself to check the status of his quirk. The next tag in this set is created as temporally perceptive. This would apply to a quirk that allows for someone to change the way someone perceives the flow of time, whether that means they see things as slow motion, or if they cause others to see things moving at a rapid pace, or any combination thereof. On the topic of time, Izuku creates one called Temporally Observant, a tag that would allow the user to grant or receive knowledge from the past or the future. This could be a very useful or very dangerous quirk, depending on how it's used. Izuku's about to write another tag, but then realizes that the previous two tags, as well as the next one, could really be applied to a quirk's nature instead of just as tags. Taking this into account, he creates a new category of quirks, temporal quirks, basically anything that allows the user to see or interact with time differently than someone else. Even though he's set it up as a category now, keeping these tags will still help him better differentiate temporal quirks. With that in mind, he writes down the last tag he has in mind. He labels this tag as temporally reactive. This is a tag Izuku hopes he never sees, a tag that signifies the ability to change or alter events in the flow of time, even if the wielder is benevolent. This power would cause unnecessary stress and confusion, as well as danger, to the user and those who work with them. Having created what would likely be the most dangerous and overpowered potential tag, Izuku decides to rest once more. He's noticed that aside from when he analyzed himself, he also gets quirk exhaustion from creating too many tags at once. He hasn't had any noticeable negative effects from it yet, but right now he can't push it too far considering how he's still recovering from his extreme quirk exhaustion. Besides, thinking of an efficient way to classify any topic as broad as quirks requires a lot of mental resources, even ignoring quirk exhaustion, which, while fun to do, is also draining and time-consuming. The next day at school, Izuku gets distracted from the class with his own thoughts, eventually deciding to message Keishi. Number 1 nerd. Hey, you know how I told you I got sick from my quirk? He waits a few minutes for a response, during which time he's definitely listening to class. Weather boy, don't tell me. You didn't do it again, did you? Number 1 nerd. What? No, of course not. I was just wondering if you had any ideas for the next time I do it. Weather boy. Even worse, if you had already done it I could have chalked it up to an accident. But you're actually planning on doing it again. Izuku didn't even consider the chance of him accidentally analyzing himself again, which could be a good excuse, except that he's terrible at lying. Number 1 nerd. I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon. I'm going to wait until I've developed my quirk more. Obviously, if I were to do it again right now I wouldn't get any new information. It would be a waste. Weather boy. Good to know that you actually thought this through. This time. But what do you mean by ideas for the next time? Number 1 nerd. Well, obviously I do want to try it again, but I can't exactly go out of commission for another week, so we need to come up with a plan that will let me do it again, without severely damaging myself. Weather boy, maybe focus on the without severely damaging yourself bit first. I think we both know some of the scratches on you aren't from Wing Chun. As he reads through the last message sent to him, he suddenly becomes aware of a problem he didn't realize he had. He didn't think that anyone noticed before. He's been careful not to get many scars during his encounters with bullies at school. He also becomes eerily aware that not only is he still in class, but Bakugo's looking directly at him. Though as soon as Izuku meets his gaze, Bakugo turns to face away. It almost seems like Bakugo somehow knows what had just been brought up in his text conversation, even though he knows that can't be true. It just feels too coincidental. Izuku also knows that it's impolite to not respond to Keishi, but at the same time, he doesn't know what to say, and it feels like silence might speak loud enough in this case. Izuku still doesn't know what to say, or how to phrase a response to Keishi's message. Even as class gets over, he knows it's just evidence that Keishi cares about him, but this is something that Izuku himself doesn't want to confront. Quickly making his way out the door, he notices something strange. Bakugo's still looking at Izuku, like he's expecting something, but he's not doing anything else. Izuku thought for sure that he would have another confrontation as soon as class got out, but instead, Bakugo is just glaring daggers at him. Not that he can complain. Bakugo is definitely at the top of the list of what Izuku does not want to deal with right now. Izuku walks the whole way home, not checking his phone along the way, but ignoring it isn't going to solve anything. No matter what happens, Izuku will end up seeing Keishi at the dojo today, which means that this isn't something that he can put off for later. When he opens the door to his apartment, he quickly gets ready to go to the dojo. But before he leaves, he reluctantly responds to the message. He's slightly surprised that Keishi hasn't sent any other messages given how long Izuku is making him wait. Number 1 nerd. Sorry for not responding before. I was caught texting in class. Technically, Bakugo did catch him texting in class, so it's not an outright lie, even if the teacher didn't. Having resolved that issue, he makes his way out the door. While he's still walking to the dojo, his phone buzzes, signifying a notification. He unconsciously stifles his breathing. Weather boy, no worries. I figured it was something like that. Also, you should be more subtle in the future. It's your own fault. Reading Keishi's response, he releases the air he didn't know was trapped and notices that his heartbeat slows down to regular levels, despite him not noticing it was accelerated previously. Crisis averted. Keishi likely doesn't think anything of it, but he's definitely going to tease Izuku for getting caught texting in class even though it wasn't how he thinks it was. Oh well, it's better than the alternative of actually dealing with what Keishi brought up. Much better actually. When Izuku reaches the door to the dojo, he hesitates a moment. He knows that Keishi at least claims to believe him. But Izuku's the one who lied first, so he can't blame Keishi if he's lying too. Eventually though, he needs to make a decision. And that decision finds Izuku inside the dojo, where his fears are proven unnecessary. Making short glances at his surroundings, he quickly finds Keishi, his demeanor not signifying anything to be amiss in the slightest. But then again, is it more or less awkward if it isn't brought up? Of course, Izuku doesn't want it to be brought up, but he also has no idea where they stand if it doesn't. Enough. That's enough worrying over something that can't be changed. There's nothing that can be done other than waiting and seeing how it resolves. Steeling himself, he walks over to his friend. This is completely normal. There's nothing to freak out about. Izuku, he mutters quietly to himself. Hiya. Izuku draws out, ensuring it to be awkward even if it wouldn't have otherwise been. How's it going? He continues. Keishi's face doesn't change in any notable way that would signify proof of Izuku's worries. Instead, he responds about as should be expected. Hey, Izuku-kun. So you really got caught texting me in class. Shame, I would have thought my upperclassmen had class. Izuku breathes out his response, just short of laughing. I mean, yes, I did get caught texting you in class, but it's not exactly how I made it seem when I told you. Oh, Keishi inquires. Whatever do you mean? If it weren't for the slight grin tugging at the corner of Keishi's mouth, Izuku might have thought it to be a normal question. But as it is, Izuku knows that whatever he says will be used as metaphorical ammo against him. And now that Izuku already brought it up, there's no getting out of saying something. Yeah, I did get noticed, Izuku explains. But it wasn't by the teacher, it was by a student, but I didn't want to risk it afterwards. Izuku feels triumph for not technically lying. Yeah, it wasn't Bakugo that made him stop texting. But he doesn't have to specify that the it in this case is the bombshell that Keishi dropped on him. Though he does also chide himself for repeating the part about getting caught yet again. Makes sense, Keishi agrees before continuing. Also, I'm sorry about that thing I brought up during class. When you stopped responding, I thought that it may have been too rude. Of course, Keishi would instantly know exactly what was going on. It's not like Izuku was being very subtle about it, even if he gave an excuse. At least Keishi now resolved the issue. If Izuku being insecure can even count as one, that is. Or at least it would have solved the issue if Izuku wasn't still standing there nearly red with shock. Izuku hadn't expected him to just outright bring it up. And his subconscious brain is still trying to get the conscious part to do something, anything but stand there doing nothing as he is. Keishi lets out a short sigh. Looks like I was right, wasn't I? His tone implies a statement more than a question. Izuku snaps back to reality, only able to release a single coherent thought. Sorry, Keishi. He nearly shouts. Sorry, for what? I'm the one who was insensitive. He lets out another sigh. No, it's fine, really. I'm good. Besides, you didn't know, Izuku explains. If you say so, Keishi agrees. Anyways, Izuku starts, eager to change the subject. I think we should probably get back to exercising before Deku sees us slacking off. Good point, Keishi agrees. The issue of Izuku being bullied isn't brought up for the remainder of dojo, but that doesn't mean he'll never have to deal with it again. So when he gets home, he decides to brainstorm ways to keep attention off of the issue by writing all his ideas in a notebook, maintaining descriptive and organized notes of the pros and cons of each option. Aka, solving his problems in the nerdiest way possible. With only 1 week until summer vacation, as well as it being a Saturday, the entire class is filled with anxious energy, ready to be done with school. Even Izuku is feeling some of the restless energy just ripping to get out of his seat. During lunch, he can already hear some people talking about some of their plans for the summer, as well as overall excitement that the school year is already halfway over. It almost makes Izuku long for a group of friends that he could hang out with all the time. Almost. Aside from how much fun it can be to hang out with people, it can sometimes be exhausting. That's part of why Izuku spent so many years at the dojo before he really had a conversation with his peers. And his current relationship with Kondon is a pretty good example that his first attempt at making an acquaintance didn't go very well. It didn't take long for Kondon to become visibly agitated at all of Izuku's rants. All that isn't to say that he isn't happy finally having Tagi as a friend. It's just different with someone who doesn't even go to the same school. It also doesn't feel great knowing that Tagi is way better at social interactions than Izuku, despite being a grade lower. All the excited voices around him are really starting to make Izuku antsy. After school, it might be a good idea to go for a walk around town. Or maybe a jog. Now that he thinks about it, he doesn't do as much personal exercise outside of the dojo anymore. When he first started there, he was eager to ensure he had the strength to do what was asked of him. But lately he's gotten complacent, only using a few weights now and then. He should work more on his aerobic exercises. School finally gets out, and he finds himself looking forward to his walk around town, even as he's walking home to put away his school supplies. Sure, there hasn't really been anything preventing him from doing it before, but he still doesn't do it very often. Arriving at his home, he takes off his shoes and changes out of his uniform. After eating a light snack and texting his mom that he's going out, he walks out the door. At first, he doesn't really have any destination in mind, but he soon decides that walking through one of the commercial districts could be fun. He doesn't have any intention to buy anything, but it's still lively enough to match the energy he'd built up during school. He sees a lot of cool shops, both that he's heard of and that he hasn't. There are a few that catch his eye, like a few hero merch stores. Looking at the new posters and chivas is always fun. Of course, there are plenty of All Might posters. Most of the stores he visits have almost a whole wall just for him. It reminds Izuku of when All Might was his favorite hero as a child. Of course, he still adores the hero, but it's just now that he's a little older, he seems so out of reach. Of all the heroes, he's the easiest to look up to, but for the same reason, he's the hardest one to match expectations with. He's not sure who's his current favorite hero. Maybe it would be Night Eye. He doesn't have a physical quirk either, but he's still one of the leading heroes. Then again, that might be due to his past relationship with All Might. Putting all that aside, there's no denying that Night Eye is strong, especially compared to most villains. A couple hours down the road, and Izuku has spent most of his pent-up energy. He's still wanting to be outdoors, but the commercial district is starting to get a little noisy for his liking. He decides to change things up by going to one of the nearby parks. As he's making his way out of the commercial district, something catches his eye. A familiar hair of red. It looks to be the same girl he had briefly met on the day that his bike was stolen. The same one he learned was Quirkless. After their first interaction, Izuku had felt dismayed over not being able to talk with her. Then again, she did seem to be in a rush at the time. He decides to not make the same mistake as last time and makes his way over to her. Luckily, she's turned the other way, so it's not so weird that he's coming closer. He considers calling out to her as soon as he's close enough for his voice to reach her, then decides to wait until he's closer to ensure it's obvious she's the intended recipient. Imagine how awkward it would be to call out and get no response. Crisis averted. Hey, Izuku cheerfully calls out. He gives her a light tap on the shoulder, confirming that this is indeed the Quirkless girl. At first, the red-haired girl jolts a little before turning around to face Izuku. Are you talking to me? She hesitantly asks. With her now facing him, he can see an employee name tag for one of the nearby stores. Her name is Yumaki. Why yeah. We briefly met the other day, remember? The other day. I don't recognize you. Confusion makes its way on her face. Yeah, you were carrying the boxes, and we kinda bumped into each other, Izuku tries to explain. I am sorry, that doesn't ring a bell. At this point, Izuku remembers that it was in fact not a few days ago, but almost 2 whole months. His face turns a light shade of red as he clarifies. Alright, that was it wasn't sorry. I was thinking all weird, it wasn't the other day. Or I guess it was another day that is wasn't today. But I realize now that it was about a month ago. Izuku gives a sheepish grin in placation. Okay, and? She questions. Alright, well, I kinda felt bad, and I wanted to talk to you. Izuku trails off. So you waited a month and randomly approached me? Izuku waves his hands in front of his face while he tries to make a case for himself. No, well, yes, maybe. I don't know, I guess. But it's not like that, I swear. I was just heading to the park and I saw you and wanted to say hi, I guess. Okay, good job, I guess. You accomplished your goal now, so I'll be headed out. Izuku doesn't know exactly what went wrong, but now she's walking away and it would just be rude to go after her again. It isn't until she's out of sight that he realizes he never shared his name, or anything that either of them could use to contact each other in the future. He could try to look up her name online, but even he's not that creepy. He decides against walking to the park after all, and uses the walk home to think to himself. He's not entirely sure why he even wants to get to know her. When he tapped her shoulder, he did get reaffirmation that she's quirkless. Maybe because he had been branded quirkless his whole life, he wants to know someone who knows what it's like. Although, maybe the fact that she's quirkless is why she was so defensive. She probably thought that he was going to make fun of her, or maybe even hurt her or something. It's a really good thing he didn't bring up quirks at all. She definitely wouldn't have responded kindly to that, especially now that Izuku's not quirkless, as strange as that thought was in the past. Izuku arrives at his apartment, and does the only thing that he can't make awkward, writing in his notebooks. He knows that he still has a long way to go in his quirk nomenclature before he'll be able to accurately define any quirk he comes across, at least to any useful degree, that is. And he also knows that he hasn't perfected his analysis of some quirks in his other notebook. But even so, he can't focus on the pages or his work. He finds himself wasting time. He eventually decides to message Keishi so he can at least do something. Number 1 nerd. Hey Keishi, no promises, but I want to see if I can analyze your brother again. Let me know when that might work out best. Izuku waits for a response. Even after only 30 seconds, he finds himself getting anxious. Despite having messaged a few times, he still feels weird about actually initiating a new text conversation. And the matter of this conversation hasn't been something he'd been looking forward to. Or rather it is, but it also isn't. He's been wanting to get more information on Keishi's older brother's quirk for a while now, but now that he's put it out there, he's put pressure on himself and his quirk. If none of Izuku's new tags find a hit on the quirk in question, he'll have wasted their time. Even if it does have any of his new tags, there's still no guarantee that he'll have enough information to actually confirm what it is. A couple minutes pass, and Izuku feels his phone buzz in his hand. Weather boy. Oh really? That's great. Think your quirk is smart enough now? Number 1 nerd. I mean, maybe. I'm not actually sure, but I'm also not sure what other tags I should or could make that would help. So I thought that maybe I could see what he has and decide where to go from there. Wait, hold on. I got like half of that. What's a tag? No, nerd. Right, I forgot that I haven't told you yet. So my quirk gives me information on other quirks, but not really like that. It's more like I make different places that a quirk can go, and my quirk just tells me which place the other quirk would fit in best. Does that make sense? Weather boy. Let's pretend for a moment that it does. Number 1 nerd. Okay, cool. So again, when would that work out best? Weather boy. I thought that you were going somewhere further with that. Never mind. They'll go ask Nyai-sen when head like. Izuku stares at his phone in anticipation, periodically tapping the screen as it begins to dim. He knows he shouldn't place so much expectation on Keishi, but he can't think of anything else right now. Finally, 6 incredibly long minutes later, a new message pops up on screen. Weather boy. Looks like tomorrow should work. How about you? Number 1 nerd. Works for me too, D. The next day, Izuku makes his way to the Tagi household again. As he walks up the steps to the door, he mentally prepares himself. This is a family of jokesters. It's not just Keishi who's like that. Maybe nothing bad happened the last time he came over, but it's hard to live down a first impression. Izuku knocks on the door, clutching his quirk nomenclature notebook to his chest. A second later, the door opens, revealing a smiling Keishi. Hey, come on in. Izuku walks in and notices a not very comfortable scene in front of him. Keishi, Atsuga, as well as both of their parents are gathered near the doorway. Okay, so maybe the parents are in the other room, but there aren't any walls to protect his anxiety. Plus, they can see him too, so it totally counts as them being in the same room. Right, so, hi, Izuku mutters out at increasing velocities. Now to, preface this, I'm not entirely sure that I will be able to tell for sure. But I thought, if I don't try, we'll never know, you know? And like, it isn't as if we'll actually lose something from trying too early, right? Right, Keishi agrees, despite not exactly hearing everything given the speed at which Izuku's mutter storms are spoken. Well then, we may as well start right away, right? Right, Izuku agrees. Is there anywhere in particular you want us to do it? Personally, I don't really need anything. It doesn't matter when or where. Really, I just need to make physical contact with Atsugawa-san. A few short seconds go by, during which a few glances are made between different members of the Tagi family. Evidently, there's a silent conversation that Izuku himself is not privy to. Eventually, Izuku can't hold it in anymore, and gets closer to Keishi to whisper in his ear. Did you really need to invite your parents too? This would be a lot easier on me if it was just you and Atsugawa-san. Keishi leaves the silent conversation with his family to respond to Izuku's quiet one. I mean, I didn't really invite them. This is my parents' house, but I guess I could ask Oniai-san if we should head up to his room. Following their decision, Keishi makes eye contact with Atsugo, glances over to Izuku, then glances to a hallway. Atsugo nods and says something to their parents before taking both Izuku and Keishi to what Izuku presumes to be Atsugo's bedroom. Atsugo's room, similar to Keishi's, is tidy with what looks to be a sky theme, but this time with a gray color and blue accents. The first thing Izuku sees when he enters the room is a desk with papers strewn across it in front of a computer, clashing with the tidiness of the rest of the room. Alright, so how does this work? Atsugo asks. Well, I just have to touch you and see if I can get any more information than last time. Izuku clarifies. Last time? When did that happen? Well, I can't exactly turn it off, so when we first met, I used my quirk on you. I see. And I know that Keishi said your quirk wasn't smart enough at the time. But how will this time be different? Well, I guess to use your words, I made it. Smarter. I guess that works, yeah. Alright, but if you're touching me we have to make it cool, Atsugo says with a smirk. He then proceeds to extend his fist into a fist bump. Izuku hesitantly gives him a fist bump and receives the revelation of his quirk. Nature, mutation. Tags, whole body, self-protective. Quirk factor 3. That it? Atsugo asks as Izuku pulls back his fist. Yeah, here let me show you what I got. Izuku brings forward his notebook, opening to the pages that list the tags he has. So it's definitely a mutation quirk, but aside from that I didn't get a whole lot of information. These two here are unfortunately the only tags that apply to your quirk, Izuku says, pointing at his notebook. So, whole body and self-protective. What exactly does that mean? Well, basically it's a quirk that increases your resistance or protection to something, and it's applied throughout the entirety of your body. But that's not all the information we have. It's not. Both Atsugo and Keishi ask in unison. Well, we also have the information that all these other tags don't apply to it whatsoever. Some of these are obvious, but for instance, since it didn't have either the inactive nor the active tag, that means that it is always taking effect, and you yourself can't toggle it on or off. Okay, is that all? Not exactly. Another part that I haven't mentioned is that I can discern someone's quirk factor. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but I know that as a quirk gets stronger that the number goes up, and that a quirk has to be used in order for it to go up. So is mine 0? No, actually, Izuku explains, the only time a quirk factor is at 0 is before it's manifested. But mine hasn't manifested. That's why we're doing this, isn't it? Your quirk is manifested, it just hasn't been discovered. And to answer your earlier question, your quirk factor is 3, which is notable. It means that even though you haven't discovered your quirk, you've still been using it, which, as a passive mutation quirk, makes sense. But my theory is that it means that since it's a form of resistance, that it's to something ever present in your life. Like solar radiation, for example, or something else that could potentially cause harm to people. Izuku doesn't notice his speaking speed is increasing to nearly unintelligible speeds near the end of his tangent. It's either that, or you have on occasion come in contact with whatever you have the resistance to, but in high enough doses that it could exercise your quirk. For that, what comes to mind to me is maybe acid, which is actually more common than most people think it is, like citrus fruits or sour candies. Did you get any of that? Keishi asks his older brother. Yeah, actually, I think I understand what he's saying, weirdly enough. So basically, I have a passive resistance quirk that I've most likely been using in small amounts throughout my whole life. The only things that I can think of like that are just what are necessary for living, food, water, and air. But I don't see how someone would have a resistance to any of those. I do, Keishi offers. It doesn't just have to be necessities. Izuku murmurs at the same time. You do? Izuku asks Keishi instead of continuing his thought. How? Air, Keishi states plainly. What? Oh, of course. Duh. Izuku smacks his palm on his forehead. That makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't we start looking in this direction solely based on Keishi's and your mother's quirk? You guys mind cluing me in here? Atsugo pleads. Cause to me, it sounds like you're implying I have resistance to air resistance. But those don't make sense. Not air resistance, air pressure. And again, this isn't 100% proven just yet, but it makes complete sense. You know how when you go higher or lower in altitude, like during a road trip, or plane flight, your ears pop? Yeah, Keishi responds in confusion. No, Atsugo responds in confusion at the same time. Well, that's a difference in air pressure, and it can take time for the body to get used to it. If the pressure is changed too quickly, it can cause damage to a person's body, or even death in some cases. So he's, like, immune to pressure differences. Most likely not immune, but assuming it is pressure resistance. Izuku turns to Atsugo. You likely have greater protection against extremely high or low pressures. Just don't go testing out against a vacuum or anything. Oh yeah, cause we definitely have a vacuum for us to test against just sitting in our house, Keishi jokes. Technically, we do have a vacuum just sitting in our house, but I don't think it will help much with any testing. Atsugo responds with a grin. Izuku groans, and Keishi chortles. Anyways, Keishi starts. Izuku, you said it's not 100% guaranteed that he has pressure resistance. How will we confirm? It honestly won't be all that difficult. Izuku explains. You've seen my list of tags, right? Right, they both say in unison. Well, I can just make another one right now that tells me whether or not a quirk provides atmospheric pressure resistance. Like right now, Atsugo asks. You don't need any special tool or anything. Keishi hasn't explained it to me very much. Mostly because I don't understand it very much, Keishi interrupts. But that seems easier than I expected it to be. Well, making any random tag is hard, especially when I have no idea what kind of tags I should be making. That's part of why I only have a dozen or so tags despite having known about my quirk for over half a year. Granted, I haven't been making tags from the beginning, but Izuku, Keishi interrupts. you're getting off topic. Oh, right. But yeah, honestly, making a specific tag is like guessing someone's password. Or maybe it's a little easier than that, but stick with me. Now that I think we might know what this password might be, all I have to do is quote-unquote type it in and then test it again to see if it's a match. Just like with passwords, if it's correct, we don't need to try anything else. But if it's wrong, we do. Alright, so then make the tag, preferably before you get distracted in another rant. Keishi teases. Already done. Izuku responds triumphantly. Already. Etsugo asks in skepticism. Yup, I just need a mental idea of how it should be. Though I will be writing it down in my notebook later today. Okay, so then go ahead and give him another fist bump, and we can see if we're right, Keishi instructs. Izuku does as he's told. This time he's the one to bring his fist out first, and Etsugo is the one to reciprocate it. Immediately, he gets the information from the quirk. Nature, mutation. Tags, whole body, self-protective, atmospheric pressure resistance. Quirk factor 3. We've got a match. Izuku exclaims. Awesome, we picked the right nerd for the job. Keishi teases. Izuku's excitement over confirming Etsugo's quirk lasts a decent few days. Now he can say that he's helped yet another person with his quirk. But he has another goal that has thus far evaded his reach, the secret behind his own quirk, and what happened when he self-analyzed. Though that's partially because realistically, he hasn't been trying very hard. Despite knowing that there's still a long journey ahead, he feels a thrumming in his chest, like he's only just grasped what he's been chasing all his life. This analysis with Etsugo was the first time he used his quirk to successfully determine someone else's. The first time he's known for certain that he can use his quirk to produce results. And there's a sense of pride that comes with it too. How many people when given a quirk like this would have just decided to never expand on it? To just be complacent being able to discern between the three basic types? To spend their life thinking they have a useless quirk? Especially when said quirk is by far Izuku's favorite. Yeah, of course it's not quite as flashy as, well, nearly any other quirk. But he's been given the gift to discern more about them than anyone else. He can discover more about a quirk than even its wielder knows. He could be the first ever person to figure out the secrets of All Might's quirk. Wait a minute. He would be the first person to find out the secrets of All Might's quirk. Would that even be safe? For decades, people have been theorizing about All Might's quirk. But he's always been vague or just turns the discussion elsewhere whenever he's asked about it. Is All Might's quirk a state secret or something? If Izuku learns the fundamental principle of All Might's quirk, would that be the same thing as stealing state secrets? That's like, probably a felony or something. Does that mean that if Izuku expands on his own quirk, he'd never be able to touch All Might? Is that trade-off worth it? What am I thinking? Izuku mutters to himself. Of course it would be worth it. This is his own quirk. Izuku's quirk. He can't give up on it just because he wouldn't be able to touch his childhood hero. While both of these are things his 4-year-old self would do anything for, developing his quirk would be more beneficial in the long run. Otherwise, he can't become the best hero he can be. Besides, even if he does end up analyzing All Might's quirk, he doesn't have to tell anyone about it. Yup, no one at all will have to know in this hypothetical situation that honestly is very unlikely to happen at all, and realistically doesn't need to have time spent thinking about it. Izuku spends the rest of his free time before summer vacation writing tags, a notable one being flight. What seems like a simple tag at first is a little more complicated once some thought is put into how it might work. For example, a quirk that grants the user wings does also allow the user to fly, but only under certain conditions. If the air pressure is too low, they can't provide enough force to get in the air. If the parameters for the flight tag are too strict, a wing quirk might not always fall under them, even if it clearly lets a person fly. There's also the fact that there are some quirks that could let a person fly, but only after excessively strengthening it. An example for this one being Endeavor. His Hellfire quirk likely didn't allow him to fly until he had pushed it to its limits. This means another factor is someone's quirk factor. Taking these into consideration, Izuku has to define it in such a way that it would be reasonable that a given quirk would be able to reach the threshold required to fly. Based on his observations of what an average person's quirk factor is, it's likely that most people don't get beyond the 70 seconds or so. Maybe heroes get closer to 200. He'll have to figure that out later, but so far the opportunity hasn't arisen. So the requirements for the flight tag to apply to a quirk is as follows. Any quirk that can provide enough force to counteract the weight of the user under most aerial conditions, assuming the quirk is as powerful as it would be with a quirk factor of 100, or as powerful as the quirk currently. That last part is just in case a quirk needs to have a factor greater than 100, but is currently higher than that requirement. For example, the quirk factor needs to be at 110 to fly, but it's at 130. After creating a decent few tags, Izuku decides to analyze his fellow classmates when given the chance, bumping into someone in the halls, handing someone a paper or something. Anything he can use to justify making physical contact with another person without being rude or unseemly. Unsurprisingly, the opportunity to analyze Bakugo comes quickly when he pushes Izuku to the wall during lunch. Normally there would be more aggression and an altercation following an act like this, but Izuku doesn't have time to think about what it means. Not when Bakugo's quirk registered as having the flight tag. This means that Bakugo could very easily be able to fly, because not only does he consistently use his quirk, but earlier in the year his quirk factor was already 37. Now, however, he's at 43. At this rate he'll be able to fly before he graduates from high school. And that's assuming he needs to get all the way up to a quirk factor of 100. He might only have to get to 60 in reality. Who knows? Not that Izuku currently has any plans to tell him that, of course. Izuku continues writing tag after tag, day after day. He finds that he's able to create a lot more tags each day than he could when he first started. Part of the reason is that he's become more creative from doing it all the time. The other part must be that his quirk doesn't get as tired as quickly from being modified, even a few weeks into summer vacation. He still creates more tags each day. He spends so little time outside of his room that Inko would definitely get worried if he wasn't still taking martial arts. It's at this point that Izuku realizes another downside to his quirk. Aside from the potential to knock himself out, his brain actually has to process all the information that comes through. This means that now, having over 200 tags, whenever he analyzes something, his brain pauses for a moment to understand everything that his quirk gives him. The more tags apply to the quirk, the more information is needed to be processed. Honestly though, Izuku's a little impressed that in the past he was able to process it all nearly instantaneously, even when it was a dozen or so. That by itself makes Izuku think his quirk might also increase the speed at which his brain functions, which could also be why when he rambles off a storm people seldom understand all that he says. What it means now though, is that he either needs to speed up his brain, or he needs to be able to control when he activates his quirk. Already, there have been a few times that he's touched someone and it hasn't activated. The most obvious time is every single time that he's touched himself, excepting the time he tried to use it. The more subtle times, though, is when he touches someone he already analyzed. At least, if he's analyzed them since the last time he's updated his quirk. But why does that happen? Or rather, why doesn't it happen? It seems to imply that his quirk has some sort of intelligence, not sentience in the way that humans or animals have, but calculated decision-making, like a computer algorithm. But if that's the case, what input information does it rely on? Izuku's memory. Does it have its own sort of memory? RAM? This is definitely something he'll have to keep in mind for the future. What's more important is either finding out how it decides to not analyze someone, or control how it decides to analyze someone. Maybe someone could help him figure it out. In all the previous times that he's talked about his quirk to Keishi, he gets the impression that Keishi doesn't really understand it all that well, as if he imagines it as this mystical thing that just exists and can't be understood. Wait a minute, there might be someone. Maybe. Mom, he calls out as he walks out of his room. Yes, she replies. I don't think I ever received quirk counseling. Oh, you're right, she exclaims. I'll have to look into what they do in cases like yours. She pauses to think for a moment, then continues. Then again, usually they just help you learn about your quirk. At least that's what they did for me. And from what I can tell, you already know your quirk pretty well and are learning more about it quite quickly. Yeah, I guess, Izuku partially agrees, but there are certain questions I have about it that I don't think I'll be able to answer on my own. All right, Inko says with a soft smile. I don't expect the middle school to have any quirk counselors on hand, so you'll likely have to go to a private one. Is that going to be a problem? Izuku asks. He has no idea how expensive private quirk counseling would be. Oh, no, not at all, she assures him. I was just thinking out loud. That's all. A few days pass, and Izuku has an appointment set up with a quirk counselor. He enters a comfortable office set up in a way that makes Izuku think of a therapist's room, with soft chairs and a welcoming window that fills the room with natural light. He sits in one of the chairs facing a large desk. Behind the desk sits a tall man with crimson hair and silver-colored eyes that are prominent even behind his glasses. Midoriya-san, I presume. Yes, that's me, Izuku replies. Great, my name is Kenryo Kanjo, but Kenryo-san is fine. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Something in Kenryo's eyes gives the impression of control. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't often provide counseling for minors. Most private counselors don't. Our job is usually to help adults learn more about their quirk should it become troubling in their lives. I see. Izuku looks away for a moment. I say this not to say that you will be a difficult client, but that my style is more tailored to adults. I don't see it being a problem. But if your learning style contrasts with how I work, let me know and I can refer you to some business partners. Okay, Izuku agrees, suddenly concerned for what these appointments might hold, what he might have to do. During this appointment, you likely won't get your answers. The first visit is a little shorter because we spend it getting to know your quirk, and later we'll test some theories. Kenryo pulls out a folder with Izuku's name on it and continues. Now, with formalities out of the way, I just want to confirm the information about you and your quirk. It says here that your quirk is Quirk Analysis. In your own words, how does it work? Izuku gets flustered at the professionalism, despite understanding that it's a useful trait for such a profession. Well, I touch someone and then I learn about what kind of quirk they have. Yes, that indeed matches up with what's written here. Kenryo taps the folder in front of him. But I always ask that question because some things are just easier to explain verbally than written. Do you know the principle on which your quirk functions? Put another way, can you break down the processes of your quirk into certain defining aspects? Yes, or kinda. I have a basic understanding, but not enough to verbalize it. I see. Can you go into more detail on how you use your quirk? On how you are presented with the information, perhaps? Kenryo suggests. He pulls a notepad closer to himself and prepares a pen. Well, when I first discovered it, it only told me whether a quirk was mutation, emitter, or transformation. But I quickly discovered that I can expand on its categorization method. He writes down some information, and afterward asks, and how did you do that? I started off by increasing the number of categories for them to be sorted, and eventually created other specifications for it to classify. Izuku realizes halfway through his sentence that Kenryo was asking about the process, not the result, and yet he can't stop himself from completing his current explanation. And those would be. Kenryo presses, as if his previous question was actually answered. The simpler of the two would be the quirk factor. It just tells me what their current quirk factor is. The more complicated one is the tags system. And can you explain it to me? Izuku is glad that his mother recommended he bring his quirk nomenclature notebook with him. Granted, he'd wanted to bring it anyway, but it helps having a second opinion. It helps him greatly as he explains how the tag system works to Kenryo. I see. Kenryo pushes up his glasses. I think I now have a good idea of how your quirk currently works. Now then, it says here that the reason for your coming was that you have questions you can't answer yourself. Would you like to present them now? Izuku flips to the back of his notebook and reads the first one he has written down. Well, one thing I'm wondering is if my brain is formed any differently than others. Why would you believe that to be the case? Because recently, I noticed that if I analyze a quirk that has too many tags, my brain freezes for a second, which means that my brain has always played an active role in analyzing. But the information was being processed faster than anyone would be able to even think the same information presented in words. And that's not even mentioned, and Izuku realizes he was probably talking too fast for Kenryo to understand, let alone make notes. Izuku shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Kenryo says nothing about Izuku's obviously abrupt stop. So you think your brain might be structured differently to process this information faster? Do you believe this heightened brain performance is suited specifically to your quirk? Or do you think it might augment other aspects of your learning, whether positively or negatively? I'm not sure, but I'm thinking it's more specific to my quirk. We can store that question for later. Do you have any more? Kenryo asks. Izuku looks at the next question on his list. So this one requires a little preface. However you want to present it is fine. So a few months ago I decided to analyze myself. Izuku pauses for a moment to collect his thoughts. While I was initially unable to activate my quirk on myself, I did get it to work. But when I did, I went unconscious and got sick for several days afterward. I see. That is troubling. The main part I'm concerned with now, though, is that the information I got was inconclusive. Part of my quirk was placed into what's basically the etc. category, which means that it doesn't fit anywhere else I've prescribed. So your question is what this hidden aspect is and how we can figure it out. Exactly. He scribbles down another note before speaking. And the next one. This one I didn't think much of at first, but realized it was weird later. When I use my quirk on someone, I have to make physical contact with them. But for some reason it works even when I touch their clothes. I see. Kenryo takes a look at the clock on the wall. Do you have another question I should note down before our time together ends? I do. I want to figure out how to touch someone without my quirk activating. At first it was because of the whole tags freezing brain thing, but I realized it might be rude to use it on people all the time without asking. I'll read these notes later and see what we can test or look out for next time. It might be a few weeks until all the paperwork gets through and ready for the next appointment. We'll message your mother when we're ready for you again. Izuku leaves Kenryo's office with his notebook clutched to his chest and a bounce in his step. He sees Inko waiting in the reception area. You ready to go? She asks him. Yeah. Izuku smiles. Let's go home. He wants to talk about his appointment but doesn't want to bring up any specifics on his own, especially as Inko is searching her purse for keys that are hopefully not actually missing. So there is silence between them until they enter their car. So, how was it? Inko asks, putting the keys into the ignition. I think it went well, though we didn't do much today. He said the first visit is usually just for sharing information, and the help comes later. Do you think he'll be able to help you? I'm not sure, but as of yet I don't have any reason to doubt him. And how about his personality? Does he seem like someone you want to work with? Izuku rolls his eyes. Mom, it all turned out fine. If there was a problem I would have let you know. After 5 days, Inko says with a hint of teasing. And it takes Izuku a moment to remember that's how long it took him to talk to her about the fainting. Mom, Izuku protests. I know. I just worry sometimes. And this is a completely new experience for both of us. They continue their drive in silence for a few minutes until Izuku speaks up again. You know, even though we didn't do much today, I'm still a little excited for the next visit. Inko hums in response. I'm glad. Izuku spends the rest of the drive home thinking of other topics or questions he might be able to bring up to the Quirk counselor in future visits, along with theorizing possible answers to his previous question. He doesn't get very far, partly because it isn't a very long drive, but mostly because he's already been pondering these same topics with no success. Shortly after arriving home, his phone pings. Weather boy, how did the nerd training go? Good afternoon, everyone. We'll start off with some light sparring to warm up. Work together in pairs according to this chart here. Shishu gestures to a blackboard set at the front of the room. A quick glance shows that Izuku is paired with a Kanaka, someone Izuku doesn't often spar with due to a difference in skill. Hey Kanaka-san, guess it's you and me this time. Izuku excitedly greets while extending for a handshake. Yeah, let's do our best. The Kanaka beams, grabbing Izuku's hand. As their hands make contact, a stream of information rushes through Izuku's head. He pauses for a second, allowing his mind to process everything, but becomes responsive again only a moment later. This is the reason he pushed for the handshake. He doesn't want to have a literal brain freeze while sparring. The information he gets paints him a rough picture of how a Kanaka's quirk might work. It's definitely an inactive emitter quirk, just like it showed last time. But he can see now that it has something to do with light, and with storing energy. He'll have to ask him about it more later. I guess we'll get to see if I've improved any in the last month or so. Izuku remarks. No, we'll get to see if you've improved any more than I have. The Kanaka corrects with a competitive smile. The fight between the two goes about as Izuku expects. They both use similar moves with similar timings, but a Kanaka always hits a little bit faster and a little bit harder. It may be a small difference in terms of speed, but it makes a big difference in the course of the fight. By the end of their spar, Izuku is panting, and sweat is forming along a Kanaka's brow. That was pretty good, a Kanaka says. Yeah, and fun too. Izuku replies between breaths. They both stand in silence, allowing their heart rates to lower when Izuku turns to face a Kanaka. Sue, I have some questions about your quirk, Izuku excitedly states. My quirk? A Kanaka responds in confusion. Yeah, it's about light and storing energy, right? Izuku fidgets with his fingers as he asks. Yep, how'd you know? Did Adamawa-san tell you? No, I just figured it out myself. Izuku replies. How exactly does it work? Wow, even though I've never used it around you before. That's amazing. A Kanaka praises, pumping his fist. My quirk is called Solar Burst. I can absorb and release light energy. Kinda like photosynthesis, except my body can't actually use the energy for anything other than turning it back into light. That's so cool, Izuku exclaims, quickly shooting out questions as fast as his mouth allows. Is there a maximum to how much energy you can hold? Or to how quickly you can emit the light? Would you be able to make a laser and burn through things? What's the brightest you've ever released? This one's a bit of a stretch, but since light is just electromagnetic waves, can you separate the two wave forms and send out magnetotational waves, or just the electrical waves? He stops for a breath of air. A Kanaka laughs for a moment before he responds. I didn't get all of that, but if I store too much energy I start to overflow, which is where my body starts glowing to release the excess. I don't actually know if there's a hard limit besides that. Izuku thinks for a moment, his hand moving as if he were writing notes despite the lack of a notebook in front of him. A second later, he finishes contemplating and asks more slowly, are you able to control the magnitude of the light released? Like, would you be able to create a laser? Or control the color? Wow, that's a lot of questions. Let's see. I can control how bright the light is, and the color to an extent. I can only release light in a color that is currently stored in my body, though I am starting to get the hang of splitting white light into others. Well, kinda. What about infrared light? Izuku blurts. I don't really know. Are you able to control when you absorb the light? Nope, just whenever I'm in bright areas. At this point, Keishi walks up to the two of them smiling and his hands in his pockets. Hey, nerd, what are you up to? A Kanaka speaks before Izuku does. He was just asking about my quirk. He has some questions I haven't thought about before. It's crazy awesome. Hey, you never nerd out about my quirk, Keishi teases. That's not true, Izuku defends, waving his hands in front of his chest. Your quirk is amazing too. I definitely have questions to nerd about on your quirk too. Oh yeah, name one question you have for me, then, Keiji says with a smirk on his face. Izuku looks down a little before he answers. Well, it's a little embarrassing. Keiji's smile falters for a second. You don't actually have any questions for me, do you? No, I really do. Izuku defends once more. It's just, I never really wanted to bother you with them. Thought you might think I'm weird. I know you're weird. Keiji laughs, taking a glance at Akanaka who's still standing. We don't have to do this right now though. Okay, Izuku agrees. It would be better to have my notebook with me anyways. Should we plan on having me over at your house tomorrow then? Keishi smiles. Here's an idea. How about we hang out at your house? At my house. Izuku stutters. Yeah, I mean, we've been friends for quite a few months. And you've been to my house a couple times now, but I've never been to yours. Keishi smirks. Any particular reason for that? No. I mean, yeah, we can hang out at my house. But no, there isn't any reason for that. That is, there's no reason that we haven't hung out at my place before. Great. I look forward to it, man. Izuku is helping Inko make dinner when the doorbell rings. I got it. Izuku calls out. Izuku opens the door revealing Keishi. He's got his hands in his pockets in a posture that pretends to be smug. Keishi nods his head upwards and says, Sup, nerd. Oh hey, Keishi. We were just finishing up dinner. Come on in. Izuku excitedly says. Izuku motions towards where the other shoes are left by the door, before walking with Keishi through the kitchen and down the hall, finally making it to his bedroom. You've got a lot of hero merch, Keishi points out as Izuku closes his door. Izuku rubs the back of his neck. Yeah, I guess I do. Though you should have seen it when I was 8. All might. Everywhere. Yeah, I can see why you needed to change that. And I guess you fixed that by getting more merch. Keishi sits down by Izuku's desk, while Izuku reaches for one of his notebooks from his shelf. Wow, you really are a nerd, you know that. Izuku chuckles a little bit. What do you mean? Quirk Analysis for the Future, Volume 9. Keishi reads off the book in Izuku's hand. Like, no reasonable person would even be able to fill 2 of those with information on quirks. And here we are. Izuku laughs once more. Yeah, I guess so. But this nerd has some questions for you. Ones that you specifically asked for, so we both know you're grateful for it. Touche. Keishi laughs out. Now what's the first question? Izuku flipped open the notebook, somewhere near the middle. The first one I wrote here is just because your quirk has aspects similar to mine. Do you remember the first time your quirk activated? I don't remember the first time it activated, but I do remember how we discovered it, Keishi explains. I was watching some show on TV, and during an ad break I switched it to a different channel, which happened to be the news. The weather spokesperson was saying the weather, and I can't remember what they said, but I remember telling my mom that they were wrong, and what the weather would actually be. Oh, interesting, Izuku exclaims. That actually answered one of my other questions too. Oh, what was it? I was also wondering if you had ever compared your quirk with the weather channel and found them to tell you different things. Izuku remarks, immediately scribbling down his new findings. Keishi smirks. I outsmarted your quirk and answered a question you didn't even ask yet. So absorbed by his notebook, Izuku almost forgets to respond, mumbling out an awkward congrats and hoping he hasn't waited too long to speak. Izuku finishes writing his notes and finally lifts his head to make eye contact with Keishi once more. But Keishi is watching him expectantly, as if waiting for Izuku to speak. Wasn't Izuku the last person to say something? Wouldn't that mean it's Keishi's turn? There's a few seconds of silence where Izuku worries that his non-response actually has made Keishi annoyed with him somehow, until he realizes what they're actually waiting for. Oh right, next question. If you saw the weather being as one thing, but then something were to change the weather, would your quirk update to the current truth? Or would it have already foreseen such an event changing the weather? It would change. There was one time when we were in one of the big cities, and a big fight between Endeavor and some villain changed the weather to cause it to rain sooner than it would have otherwise. 6-year-old me was so confused until I figured that out. I see. So it's not really a future sight quirk. It's more of a calculative quirk. Izuku writes down some notes before reading the next question. And you said earlier that you can see about 5 hours in the future. Was it always this amount of time? Or has it changed? It's definitely changed. When it first manifested, I could only see, or I guess calculate, about an hour or so in the future. So it has room to improve further then. That's so cool. Izuku beams while writing more notes. What makes it so cool? Alright, so you know how you got the weather right when that channel got it wrong? Yeah, Keishi asks. Well, due to the butterfly effect, ever since weather predicting technology has existed, it's never been accurate past a week or so, and even on the single-day prediction it can be dodgy. This is centuries worth of technological development that has only improved by the slightest of margin. Izuku takes a breath to prevent himself from rambling past comprehension. Okay, and if you could develop your quirk to tell you even a couple days ahead, you would be leaps and bounds more accurate than any scientific measurement. Anyways, my next question, Izuku starts, before Keishi interrupts. Hang on, not only can I outsmart your quirk, Keishi begins slowly, I am greater than all the scientists who ever lived. Well, maybe not all of them. But if we were to assume, it would really only be the meteorologists. Speaking of, can you tell if a meteor is coming? I mean, how would I know? Has one even come in the years since manifesting my quirk? Well, there was that one that burned up over Europe a few years ago, but maybe it was too far away. Do you know what the range of your quirk is? The range? Keishi asks. Yeah, so for example, you can't tell what's going on with the weather over in America, can you? No, yeah, I got that, but so how far does your quirk extend? I don't actually know. Can you see what the weather is like at your house? Keishi appears to be in thought for a moment before replying. No, I can't. I see, Izuku mutters while writing in his notebook. So you most likely wouldn't know if a solar storm were coming, space weather and all that. Yeah, space weather, of course. Alright, on to the next question. Why is it that whenever I ask about how long into the future you can see, you always say something like 5 to 6 hours or something? Izuku tilts his head. Why don't you give an exact number? Because the amount of time I can see is always changing. Like the weather. Interesting, Izuku quietly comments, momentarily causing Keishi to freeze. Do you know what it's based on? As far as I can tell, it goes by my mental state. So if I'm calm, I might be able to see a little over 6 hours. But if I was upset or had a headache, that number would be closer to 5. Or maybe even less. I see. Izuku writes down another note to himself. So I guess you don't have much of a range, but what about precision? Precision? Keishi asks. Yeah, like how the Weather Channel gives you one data point each hour, or sometimes half hour. How specific is the information your quirk gives you? I don't know, pretty specific. Less than 10 seconds. That's amazing, Keishi. Izuku beams. Keishi's put a little off guard, but quickly composes himself. I guess. So that's your precision in time. What about accuracy and prediction? Do you know the exact temperature that it will be? Or how fast the wind will go? Not in exact measurements, no. But it's sort of like a feeling. Like, I can tell how hot or cold I would feel, or how windy it would feel if I were to stand outside during that time. That must make it easy to decide how warm you need to dress on a given day. Everyone else has to think along the lines of, would I feel cold at 18? Whereas you would just be like, yeah, I should bring a jacket. Izuku tries to lower his voice a little to mimic Keishi, but ultimately bursts out laughing. Keishi glares at Izuku, but it doesn't do much to the grin stretching to his eyes. I don't sound like that. I don't sound like that. Izuku mimics. Come on, Keishi chuckles out. It's not funny the second time. Then why are we both laughing? Never mind that. Let's just get on with the next question. Keishi is clearly trying not to laugh. Izuku attempts to ask the next question, but only gets a few syllables in before he bursts out in laughter once again. A minute passes with Izuku continuing his futile attempts at getting out a coherent sentence, while Keishi explains why it really wasn't that funny. Alright, Izuku pants out, I'm good. Izuku stops laughing, but spaces out for a moment as his cheeks burn from laughing too hard. So then, the next question would be, right, this one's a bit ridiculous, and based on the answers of the last few questions I think I already know the answer. But are you able to tell how many clouds are in the sky? Yes and no. I can't tell specifically how many clouds there are, but I get an estimation on how cloudy it is, even if I don't look outside. That's cool. I thought for sure you wouldn't be able since it's not that specific. But that makes sense. Yeah, I guess. Keishi waits a moment before asking, got any more questions for me? Izuku clutches the notebook to his chest. I mean, I do. But they're all kind of ridiculous, and I don't think you would have even tested it. Maybe I haven't, maybe I have. But we won't know unless you ask. Plus, even if I haven't tested them, I definitely won't if you don't ask. That's true, I guess. Izuku turns away from Keishi as he continues talking. So I have this little theory. Keishi subconsciously affirms that our quirks affect our personality and are kind of, I don't know, actively trying to get us to discover them. Izuku takes in a breath of air, but quickly continues to explain his point. It makes sense if you think about it. There are so many obscure quirks that wouldn't affect most people's lives. And yet, so few people haven't found their quirk. Myself and your older brother are by and far outliers. I guess that makes sense. But you also haven't asked a question. Right, getting to that. If our quirks do affect our personality, would yours affect your mood depending on the weather? I don't know. I don't think so. It would be kind of creepy if it did, don't you think? Yeah. I did say these next questions are a little ridiculous. True. Keishi agrees. This next one is another hypothetical about as ridiculous as the last one. Are you ready? Izuku warns. Yeah, I guess. It's hard to be ready with such a vague threat. Warning. Is that a threat or a warning? Izuku laughs a little. Well, I can be certain when I say it is not a threat. But anyways, the question is that even though your quirk doesn't predict if someone might change the weather, would it predict if you were to change the weather? Izuku, I hate to break this to you, but I can't change the weather. Well, yeah, no, obviously. I meant like, if you were to get someone else to change the weather for you, but as your decision, not theirs. I have never once in my life tried that, Keishi monotones. Also, this question wouldn't even work as a question if you didn't already know the answer to the other weather-changing question. Did you already assume the answer to most of these? Or did you just think of a bunch more in the past 5 minutes? Izuku's face starts turning red, and he pulls his head to his shoulders. Would you believe me if I said it wasn't in the past 5 minutes? Definitely not. Darn, I didn't think so. Inko knocks on the door and enters his room for a moment. Dinner's ready. One last question, Izuku says, turning back to Keishi. All right, fire away. What's the weather going to be like later? Dark. Keishi deadpans. Izuku grins to himself. No duh, baka. Dumb questions get dumb answers, nerd.